All right, let's just pick up where we left off. If you just stumbled across this video and you haven't seen part one, there is a first half to this TITANpointe video. So I strongly encourage you to go back and watch part one. But anyway, if you want to continue watching this video right now first, I will try to just segue with bullet points from it. So we were researching these giant windowless stone megalithic skyscrapers that are in several major cities across the United States of America. At least 8 major cities that we know of, all extremely left-leaning cities. Now, originally they were AT&T telecommunication hubs. Then they transferred into the power of the NSA surveillance network when the NSA started monitoring all of our calls and text messages and now internet activity and that type of thing. Now, where we get the nickname TITANpointe from are the leaked documents from former CIA employee Edward Snowden. He listed these locations as NSA surveillance hubs by name, by address in those documents, and the surveillance network was codenamed TITANpointe. Most of these buildings were built decades and decades ago. The one in New York here on the screen was built in the 1970s, and the architects intentionally designed them to basically be an impenetrable fortress. They're said to be obviously Faraday cage insulated, so nothing like an EMP or solar flare or anything can take this network down. Likewise, they are structurally designed to withstand even a nuclear blast. Now, since they were built as long ago as, the 1970s and such, I don't know if they really could withstand a nuclear blast or bunker busters, but most of the smaller ones that are under, say, 20 stories tall, the majority of their supercomputer infrastructure is indeed in bunkers underground. They say that the facility is more stories deep than it is tall. So after the secret police took control of all of these telecommunication hubs, over the years, they just got more and more technologically advanced, and they have moved beyond just server farms and supercomputers. They now have D-Wave quantum computer technology operating inside these facilities. And D-Wave quantum computers are not just super fast computers. They are something completely different, type of quantum physics and interdimensional quantum physics. If you visited my channel before, then you probably know that I've done multiple videos showing the actual clips of Geordie Rose explaining the technology from his company Kindred that has the Ouroboros and all of the connections with that, and how D-Wave stands for Delta Wave, which is our dream state, which is part of Project Montauk's Delta T antenna. This is the newest iteration of that Delta T antenna. So this D-Wave computer system reaches into this artificial dimension, the AI singularity dimension. And the implications of these technologies are so far beyond anything that I will ever be able to explain here. But suffice it to say, this type of power should not be in the hands of corrupt politicians and this secret police that we call the intelligence agency that keep us in the dark about all of reality and where we are at technologically as a species, and that they alone get to have access to this information. And now we see they have turned it over into the hands of regimes who want to enslave humanity with it. And one of the applications of this quantum computer network is Project Looking Glass, which is a CIA project from way back that was very primitive compared to what we have now with the artificial intelligence, where it is their version of a godhead, this omniscient AI that gathers all information from all humans' digital footprint, all of our actions, all of our decisions, all of our preferences, all of it. And then it can prognosticate all of the possible outcomes of the decision-making process. That's why we see these things like The Simpsons able to broadcast ahead of time, things that we see in our reality with great, great precision. It's not that all humans are going back, 20 years ago and digging out cartoon scripts and acting them out to do the same thing. That's exactly backwards. It's that these media companies who are owned by the intelligence agencies, they are broadcasting the predictive programming. I know a lot of people in the truth community, buy into that with like the Illuminati card set and all of that, that it's just as simple, it's just as black and white, just three-dimensional. It's just that they wrote a script and everybody's in the script and everybody's in on it. But it's not. It's more like five-dimensional chess, seven-dimensional chess. And the reason we see this sort of specificity in this predictive programming is because they have looking glass.
We're through the looking glass here, people.
We're through the looking glass here, people.
And yes, they have a plan. Of course they have a plan. They have a multi-generational plan. I'm not saying that they don't have a plan. I'm saying that the plan they have is based on moves from the intelligence gathering through these incredibly high technologies that we've been told don't exist. And if you dare even think that they do or want to discuss the possibility, then they'll tell you you're crazy and try to destroy you. But despite the incessant gaslighting and economic warfare to, demonetize us, get us fired from our jobs, anything the cancel culture can do to harm us as humans and persecute us for speaking about forbidden subjects, despite all of that, many of you might remember back in 2013 when Barack Obama launched the brain mapping initiative and started pouring hundreds of millions of dollars from government funds, from our treasury, into this effort to map all of the circuits of the brain so that they can wirelessly, read your mind. I don't know how else to put it. There are no need for euphemisms at this point. People deny psychic abilities. Oh, nobody could read anybody else's mind. Well, technologically, they absolutely can. Of course, this has been going on long before 2013, but that's when they started sort of bringing it out to us, dripping out information about it to us. So here's an article from the New York Times, just to let you guys know, not that I like the New York Times, I know that they're Mockingbird Media, but just to let you guys know that this isn't something from a conspiracy theory site. This is our government is financing this openly. If this is what they're showing us openly, you can imagine what they're doing in the black ops projects behind closed doors. Okay, so the article says, the initiative, which scientists involved in promoting the idea have been calling the Brain Activity Map Project, will officially be known as Brain Research through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. Neurotechnologies. This is what we're talking about, all of these neural implants. Again, if you haven't watched the last video, in there I linked all of the videos, the optogenetics videos, all of the other research and patents, so you can go verify what I'm saying. This is real science. This is where we are. So anyway, that really long official name boils down to the acronym BRAIN. It's the BRAIN Initiative, which was a foundational step that had to be mastered in the Sentient world simulation, which is the AI hive mind, or the singularity, the artificial dimension. We use lots of different terms for it. And these projects have been funded for many years by private money as well as our national treasury when this cabal is in charge. In the last video, I had also mentioned this, the video I did on the shocking Jeffrey Epstein connections that you won't hear in the news. And it discusses all of the stuff that has been overshadowed by his sex life, and that is that his scientific, philanthropic foundation was making donations to all of these scientific projects like ECOG, mind control through neural interfacing. And I list a ton of those connections in great detail in that video. And I bring this up again now because we didn't get to finish talking about the Manchurian Candidate subject. I got cut off right there at the end, talking about how these NSA supercomputer server farms and these D-Wave quantum computers, that are already operating in these telecommunication hubs or these CIA secret locations, like this network hidden in plain sight in our major cities called TITANpointe. I wanted to continue sourcing that information and showing you some more of the scientific evidence to help understand that this hive mind, this sentient world simulation, it's real. It's absolutely real. And once these neural implants are installed in all of us, and they already are, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they have been for generations. If you've watched my Rh negative blood type deception video, then you'll note that I go through and even talk about the antigens stuck on our blood cells. It's exactly like they talk about the spike proteins stuck on the cells. That's what the scientists have told us our whole lives determines blood types. We all have the same exact blood cells, but someone who tests positive for A means you have this antigen stuck on. If you test positive for B, then you have a different nanotechnology. If you test positive for A and B, then you have both of those stuck on you. And the difference between positive and negative is the Rh antigen. Do you have it stuck on you? So some people have all of them, some people have a couple of them, some people have none of them. And that's why the elites, we talk about them, being Rh negative, is of course, they know about these technologies and they go to great lengths to keep these nanotechnologies out of their own bodies, but in our bodies. And shockingly, that is precisely what these people who came forward, claiming to be experimented on, abducted from the time they were children, experimented on with this, black goo injections, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and all of this, the super soldier and secret space programs. And I thought, I have to admit it, I thought they were crazy, 10, what was it, 10, 12, 13, 14 years ago when I first saw these people coming out. I didn't get it at all. And I was like, okay, they're clearly dysfunctional. And now, in hindsight, after everything the Lord has shown me, I go back and I watch this same things now and I'm like, no way. Everything they say is matching up with reality. Like Max Spears, one of the things he talked about were these Nazis who were experimenting with the B blood type because that was known to be a quote hive mind blood type.
From a researcher that's been with the Basis Project for a very long time, is doing a heck of a lot of work specifically involving the Nazi bases, right, the concentration camps that Barry King is referred to in Germany, and the use of concentration camp victims in precise blood groups. And you concurred that she was just messaged me saying that the Germans are very interested in blood group B. Mm-hmm.
Right, and you superimpose that into the body. Okay, I think that the Germans are not only interested in blood group B. I think they're also extremely interested in any of the rhesus negative blood, particularly O negative and actually AB negative. But going back to B, B positive or B negative blood group works like a hive blood group, works like a hive mind blood group. Not to say that anybody who has B blood is not an individual themselves, it's just on a collective level. They are working for a single agenda without knowing it. So if you could amass a huge amount of people with blood group B, then you could have sort of an army working for you, and each individual would be unknown that they are actually part of the collective.
And all that time ago, he was talking about an artificial intelligence supercomputer system called, quote, the Beast. And it was the sort of head of this network of supercomputer systems, like we're talking about TITANpointe, that there are these server farms, this network of them in nations all around the world, not just in our nation. But he said the Beast, the head of it, was in Belgium. He even talked about two factions, like a communist faction that worked with the Nazi faction. Another one, James Casbolt, another one of these super soldier whistleblower types, was saying that it was the Nazi Fourth Reich. They talked openly about these 100-year wars that they went in cycles. Now, that's not to say that they're all good. You know, if you've studied this, there's a split, several splits in that group. Just because they were all part of a program doesn't mean they're all besties. And James Casbolt, they all say he's very Nazi. He's like a Nazi. He believes in it. And so he was always trying to be the handlers of everybody else in the group when they came out, because he was still working for the Nazi Fourth Reich. So I don't know if that's due to an overabundance of the nanotechnology controlling him, or if that is just his personality type, because they say he's very violent. He's been arrested and stalked people and all kinds of stuff, so that we don't see with the others. But I just find that super interesting now, because in hindsight, what are the odds? What are the odds that everything we've been shown is coming to pass now, is being done out in the open by these tech giants? They were talking about it decades ago. And if you still can't believe them, then here's some clips from the actual tech giants, the people doing it, and researchers, scientists, and everybody. Here, have a look.
It's backed by Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, NASA, and the CIA. Each one costs $10 million and operates at 459 degrees below zero.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
They call it the Infinity Machine, quantum computing.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced. Not praised. No expenditure is questioned. No rumor is printed. No secret is revealed.
If you go all the way back to Norwood Wiener, the goal of creating artificial intelligence was to create an all-seeing eye.
Did you catch that? The goal of creating artificial intelligence is to create an all-seeing eye. This is their idea of resurrecting their sun god, Lucifer, which the Bible says God destroyed. So now the Nazis call it the black sun. You know, it's the sun that God took the light from. God destroyed Lucifer. He doesn't exist anymore. This is their mad scientist idea of technologically resurrecting their god, Lucifer. One of these TITANpointe big stone buildings, the one out in Los Angeles with Mayor Garcetti, it actually has an all-seeing eye landing pad right next to it. And in many of my videos throughout the years, I've shown this architecture that they put everywhere. Like the swastika building, which was another building out in California, was actually used as a Navy barracks for a while, I believe. And then, of course, the pentagrams or pentagons, pentagrams everywhere, even with just the street layouts. And no, our founding fathers didn't build all of this. This is all modern architecture and modern infrastructure that the spellcasters came in and built on top of us and all around us.
The goal of creating artificial intelligence was to create an all-seeing eye.
So that is the crux right there of this surveillance system we call TITANpointe, an all-seeing eye. Not just using supercomputers like Hammer, which we all know in the foot-high stack of declassified documents that President Trump declassified on his way out the door pertaining to Obamagate/Russiagate. That was the testimony. This supercomputer called Hammer, which we'll talk about the guy who designed it and show some of his testimony later on when we get to the good guys and the generals and their testimony. But the point for right here is they have this surveillance system, this all-seeing eye, and Hammer was the supercomputer used to spy on Donald Trump during his campaign before he was even in office, and on all of his associates and everything. But it's bigger than that. Firstly, all the way back in the first Clash of the Titan video, which was what, like 3 or 4 videos ago, I put the testimony, General McInerney, in his own words, not my words. I'm not alleging anything. I'm just telling you what General McInerney said and showing you him saying it in his own words. He said that Comey had sold the application for the Hammer supercomputer, and that application was called Scorecard. So the same exact supercomputer system by name, listed by name in the documents, Hammer, was both involved in the secret police surveilling Donald Trump, and it was also involved in the 2020 election. But secondly, this story is much, much bigger than that. The quantum computer, all-seeing eye that they are going for is omniscience. This beast, this godhead that they think they have created, this surveillance system that TITANpointe is just a small part of, they really see it as the all-seeing eye, the omniscience, that it knows all and sees all. Good grief. Anthony Lewandowski of Google, he even started a church, filed for 501c3 tax-exempt religious status, founding a new religion called the Way of the Future, which is worshiping this AI Godhead, singularity. They believe they're going to upload their consciousness and everything. I've made several videos on it. You can go see them in their own words. It's crazy. Yeah, talk about inversion. Instead of God creating humans, they believe that they created God.
So does God exist? Well, I would say not yet.
The goal of creating artificial intelligence was to create an all-seeing eye, a global computer that sees all, sees everything, and to become gods.
And the Sentient World Simulation, SWS, went live in 2007.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe?
These nanobots, these blood cell-sized devices, will be going in our bodies. We'll have some go inside our brains through the capillaries, non-invasively. They'll be interacting with our biological neurons. They'll put our brains on the internet, and they'll also enable us to enter a virtual reality environment from within the nervous system. So if I want to go in a virtual reality environment, the nanobots will shut down the signals coming from my real eyes and my real skin and create the signals that would be appropriate for the virtual environment, and then it'll feel like I'm in that environment.
This isn't real.
Real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
If we have algorithms that stimulate the right things and give it the right data, they could reprogram you in a way without you even knowing it. We call it hallucinating, right? But these would be controlled hallucinations run by algorithms. So you think you're in control of your own will, but it's actually some evil AI or evil people controlling everything we do, and we're more like zombies, you know? Like we think we're free and we're not actually free.
It's just on a collective level. They are working for a single agenda without knowing it. So if you could amass a huge amount of people with blood group B, then you could have sort of an army working for you, and each individual would be unknown that they are actually part of the collective.
You know, like we think we're free and we're not actually free.
It is called the Sentient World Simulation. The program's aim, according to its creator, is to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the entire planet, complete with billions of nodes representing every person on the Earth.
Targets and mind control victims have their minds linked up for life with conscious supercomputers, which send a steady stream of bidirectional, low-frequency electromagnetic radiation to the target's brain.
And what people have to realize is that these targeted individuals are basically the test stage for rolling all of this madness out to all 7 billion of us on this planet.
And this was a white paper put out by Purdue University in 2006, and the Sentient World Simulation, SWS, went live in 2007, which represents every person on the planet within this computer matrix as a node, and every node is given an avatar, an identifier. And that is real-time, 24/7 monitoring of every person on the planet. This is primarily, but not exclusively, facilitated by the adiabatic quantum computers produced by D-Wave Corporation.
At the time of initial reports on the program, there were only 62 country-level simulations being run by the US Department of Defense. These simulations grouped humans into composites, with 100 individuals acting as a single node. But already at that time, the US Army had used the systems to create a one-to-one level simulation of potential Army recruits.
It's the stuff of a Hollywood movie, but a group of veterans has filed a lawsuit against the CIA and U.S. Army claiming that the government planted remote-controlled devices in their brains. The claims relate to a government program at the U.S. Army's Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland.
The ultimate aim would be to archive enough data on each individual to be able to make a computer model of everyone on the planet.
The human genome, we have a finite in the hundreds of thousands of different genes across our species. And we mapped them out in the Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. You know, President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
And the goal is to make a cognitive model or map of the victim's brain. Ultimately, the system replicates and digitizes the will, intellect, and emotions, the soul of the targets, and downloads this back into the conscious computer.
Robots the smartest people. Artificial intelligence, AI. The idea is to port the software from the human brain. First, we're going to need lots of cheap, fast, parallel computers.
He was referring to parallel processors, about servers. What he did not state was that it is actually the quantum computer systems coming out of D-Wave that actually creates and drives this new matrix known as the SWS. It is not transistor-based servers that run this. They are qubits, quantum bits. It is the SWS and D-Wave that comprises this new matrix.
Okay, so I believe here is where we have another mystery solved. You guys, a lot of you probably anyway, remember Dr. Roger Leir. He has since passed. But many years ago, especially back in the 1990s, he became pretty famous for removing these alien implants. That these abductees were telling people that they had these implants and nobody would take them seriously. But Dr. Roger Leir did take them seriously, and he said, well, if they're there, let's prove it. Let's get to the bottom of this. So he started bringing them in and doing x-rays to find out, is there anything in there? And yes, they found them on the x-rays. So he assembled a team of surgeons and began removing them. And oddly enough, when I went back to get these videos off of my own YouTube channel, I put Roger Leir's videos of his surgeries and his presentations on what he found on my YouTube channel 12 years ago. And so I went back all the way back to the beginning of my YouTube channel and they're all gone. They've all been removed. Nobody sent me a notice. Nobody said anything. And they were so old, it's not something I would ever see in my feed. But yeah, I went back all the way back to my oldest videos and all of the Roger Leir videos are gone. But I was able to scrounge around and find the clips that I want to use. And I'll put links below down in the description box so you can go and watch some of his full-length presentations, like maybe an hour-and-a-half seminar from Dr. Roger Leir if you want. And I want to show you some clips of his findings that were super mysterious back in the 1990s. But now that we understand artificial intelligence and nanobots and black goo and all of this, it makes perfect sense. Like some of the anomalies were, there was no incision, there was no scar, no incision point. But now we know that through the chemtrails, through the food supply, through the water supply, through the jabs that we've all had since we were children, through all of these different means, they have been layering this nano into us. He talked about them being linked into the neural system, and that when they would try to remove them, they would, as if they were alive, they would move away from him when they would go in to pull them out. When they put them on the gauze to take them over and look at them under the microscope, they appeared to move as well. Also, many of them were solid objects on the X-ray, but when they went in and removed them, once they put them out on the gauze, They seemed to break apart as if they weren't one object, but they were made of many objects. They would like disintegrate once they were removed from the body. To actually trick them into not breaking apart so that they could investigate them, they would have to store them in the patient's blood serum. Others would just start breaking apart inside the body when they started to take them out. They'd say, well, they're just so brittle or whatever. They would start to fall to pieces. Yet some of them had coatings so hard on them that the scalpel couldn't even cut through it. And some of them seemed to have the exact same properties as the FEMA whistleblower talks about with the hydrogel. So, I mean, there were some really strange anomalies back in the 1990s that nobody could make sense of. But we can, now that we understand nanomachines and nanobots and all this AI self-assembly nanotechnology. It seems crazy, but in my humble opinion, I believe that what Dr. Lear was removing from these patients is this self-assembly nanotechnology. It explains every single one of the mysteries and anomalies. I'll play a couple of clips right here.
Have you all had breakfast? That's good. Those of you who have not eaten. Because we're going to start out by showing you a small clip of the last surgery. Now what you're looking at is a television device that's connected to what we call a C-arm, and it actually shows you what's going on inside the body. Where you place an instrument, you can actually see what you're doing. It makes it a lot easier to remove these objects. Now, many times when you're in the tissue and you're looking at it on the television screen, you will see that the object appears to move out of the way. We don't know why this is, unless there's some kind of an electromagnetic field that forms and it's repulsed. But remember, all the surgical instruments are stainless steel, and they are supposedly not capable of interacting in a magnetic field, so it's still a bit of a mystery. Telemundo just aired a two-part, 1 hour each major program on this case, which I will go over. Here's the object after it's been removed. It's still covered with its biological coating. And we had an instrument which is essentially a microscope that was a very powerful optical microscope, and we were able to get it under the microscope and look at it almost immediately after it was removed from the body, which gave us a new insight as to what some of these things look like. There's one portion I should add that when looking at it through the microscope and the computer, that we saw something move, and this was after it was out of the body. So we still don't know exactly what that is. There's always something to learn. Here's the microscope, and he's getting it set up, and we'll put the object under it, and you'll be able to see what it looks like on the screen. Here's what it looks like on the screen, and this is looking through the microscope. It's just one small part of it, one very tiny, tiny, tiny little piece. Here's another view.
Dr. Lear described some of the extraordinary findings discovered during this amazing surgery.
There is no portal of entry. There's no evidence how the object got inside the body. Then when we look at the soft tissues that surround the object, we find there is no inflammatory response. This is impossible, because anything that enters the body should have an inflammatory response. And then thirdly, they are surrounded by a large number of nerve proprioceptors which are not anatomically correct.
Once the outer biological membrane was removed, it revealed a triangular-shaped object. This object was housed in yet another gray membrane. Remarkably, this inner membrane could not be cut, even with a surgical scalpel.
One of the cases we did was emanating a radio frequency which was verified by a friend of mine in Las Vegas, let's put it that way, who sent me a classified FCC sheet, and we found out that that frequency was broadcasting on a deep space radio frequency. Now, if that don't knock your socks off, I don't know what does. We have emissions coming from this last case too. We use a Gauss meter to detect the electromagnetic activity, and we found that we had a magnetic field of greater than 10 milligauss. Ionizing radiation, we were only able to detect the normal background radiation using a Geiger counter. And the radio emissions, again, we're at 14.749650 megahertz. I don't know yet. I haven't had enough time to find out exactly where on the band or where that is going, but we're finding out. We had emissions of RF and ELF and in the microwave bands. We have multiple witnesses who are viewing this either on TV or live, and then they signed forms stating that they were there. Now, the specimen appeared, when you looked at it as on an X-ray, as a solid unit. But yet when we went to remove it, it came out in multiple fragments. And the fragments, as in the other cases, were surrounded by this very strange type of biological coating, which we've been finding with some of the other objects. The fragments were all placed on a surgical drape, which you will see, and I had to very carefully pick these fragments up and put them in the specimen container, which contains the patient's own blood serum. And we find, again, that this biological tissue now, it just doesn't surround the metal, that it's growing from metal. And
growing from
the metal.
Okay.
So we looked at, the possibilities in academia of, what universities are growing biological tissue from, and there aren't any. As far as black budget is concerned, maybe they are, but we don't know anything about it.
Right.
So we actually look, with EDX electron microscopy and see that the actual biological tissue is growing out of the metal. I mean, that's a very strange thing. And then we look at the metals themselves, and we find things like elements that are very rare, that you don't find on Earth laying around, like iridium. Iridium has a small percentage of the Earth's crust, but it's very, very difficult to come in contact with. You find that in one of these objects that's in an abductee's body, in combinations with other things, structures such as nanocarbon tubes, nanocarbon fibers, orthorhombic sodium chloride crystals that are rectangular and varying in size. And you look at these things and you check not only magnetic fields but radio emissions and find that they do emit radio waves. We have something here that's a device. It's a manufactured device, and it's evidently a manufactured device for a specific purpose and not manufactured by our culture.
So all the way back then, that was quite a mystery. What is this strange coating, and how could these implants he was taking out be neurologically meshed into the human biological tissue, and all of this stuff that was a mystery back then? But now, doesn't it sound a lot like these hydrogel biosensors and the nanotechnology and all of the stuff that we see Bill and Melinda Gates working with Silicon Valley, working with the Department of Defense? So let's juxtapose some of these articles about today's technology against what Dr. Roger Leir was finding in people all those decades ago.
Self-assembly is about how independent parts come together on their own to build precise things. I'm Skylar Tibbetts, and I'm the director of the Self-Assembly Lab at MIT.
At first, nothing too interesting happens. But then we notice some movement. The balls start forming chains, called shooters, that try to reach the outside of the dish.
And that's on a macro scale, you know, just to show you how the self-assembling works. It's very simple technology. But on the nano scale, that's precisely what we're seeing in the Morgellons disease, that these wires, these fibers are self-assembling in the body, and our bodies are trying to push them out.
Dr. Casey has taken numerous fiber samples and says they're unlike anything she's ever seen.
They are not textile. They are not any known substance.
Dr. Casey was amazed by the mysterious fiber on Brian's hand and decided to have it tested. She tugs on it, but the fiber holds firm. Finally, it comes loose.
We took the whole plug of skin with it.
Dr. Casey and her colleague, Dr. Randy Wymore, take the samples to Tulsa's crime lab.
Morgellons fibers are not any known textile, cotton or rayon or nylon, not any of those.
What's more, the fibers don't burn when exposed to high heat.
Have you ever done a fiber that didn't vaporize completely other than the Morgellons fiber?
No. Many in the medical community are nonetheless skeptical, but people who say they have Morgellons are desperate.
These are silver fibers. It's not cotton. This is what the COVID Q-tip test is. You see that one down there alive? They do their own thing. Look, he's trying to grab it. He's mad. See him? This is what they put in the head. And I'm gonna come over here to the regular cotton. Nothing. There's proof. Regular cotton don't do a damn thing. It's not fighting. It's not moving. I'm putting it by. It's not doing absolutely nothing. Nothing. Nothing.
Whether alive or nanomachines and nanosmart dust with magnetic properties, cotton swabs are not magnetically attracted to each other.
Okay, so you get the point. I don't want to put too much of this stuff in here because I don't want to lose the value of the entire video reaching people over it. I will put links below in the description box to full documentaries about this stuff if they don't break the links. Now they're breaking links even. But anyway, like here on the screen, this is from Johns Hopkins' actual official website. This is common. We know they're using all sorts of nano machines inside us. All sorts of nano delivery systems. You know, in past videos, I've shown all of the footage from Rice University and the patents and the doctors and all of it. It's all there. If you want to know about it, it's all there. So I'm not going to put it here in this video as well. I want to keep moving because the end game of layering all of this into our circuits, into our body, is to move us out of this frequency into those delta frequencies, the D wave, quantum dimensions, or virtual reality. That's this frequency range right here. Delta brain waves occur during deep sleep. It's the unconscious mind. So have you ever seen somebody sleepwalk and they're completely, it's not them. Something is animating them. They're completely asleep, and yet their body is up walking around. Well, that's what all of these people are seeing in the, quote, zombie apocalypse, prophetic dreams and visions from the Lord, where they see these people like shuffling around. They're like zombies. They're up and moving around, but they're not there. That's this link, this neural link, this brain link, which links in to this network of supercomputers, quantum computers, that Max Spears and people like that said they literally called the beast, and the headquarters of it was in Belgium. Now, I don't know if it's the headquarters is actually in Belgium, but we can see here in our country with TITANpointe and this network of NSA, CIA, AT&T, telecommunications / supercomputer, quantum computer hubs, that it is in our country. And we can also see that since the advent of COVID-19, that the tech giants have come out of the closet and they're openly talking about using these quantum technologies, quantum dots, nanotechnologies, all of this in our lives as we move forward. That's the mark of the beast. That's what will happen. They will be Unlike the Matrix, where it shows people just laying in machines, like out of it asleep, and the computers are in there. It's, not big, giant metallic robot machines. It's nanobot machines. So their bodies are still functional. And this whole sleepwalking phenomenon ties into what we call demonic possession, people who black out and do these crimes and do these things, and then they come back and they don't have any memory of committing these horrible crimes. Again, Manchurian Candidate. This also ties into the alien abduction phenomenon with the missing time, where people go and do something and they don't have any memory of it. It's what most would commonly call sleepwalking. But like I talked about in part 1 of TITANpointe, this is also what's commonly reported in the phenomenon called Missing 411. The compilation of books by David Paulides that talk about these strange cases. And this doesn't account for all of the cases. There are multiple things going on. But there's a huge section of those cases where people just seem to go unconscious or subconscious, and they just walk off. And they're told to go to a particular area, and they do strange things, usually the same things. They take their shoes off, they remove their clothes, and some of these people, when they get to that place, someone is there to meet them. And unfortunately, those people are usually never seen again. In other instances, they do themselves in. Most of the drownings that they find with these people who just walked off in the David Paulides Missing 411 books, they find them in, say, water that's only 6 inches deep or 12 inches deep, and yet they've laid down and drowned themselves without any evidence of any sort of struggle or anything like that. In other cases, the people are found and they just don't have any explanation for how they went into this sleepwalking type state. Remember that case that made it to mainstream news, out of, self-published books and into actual mainstream news, like the skier who went missing in New York and ended up in California and had to buy a cell phone and called his wife, and he's like, I don't know what's going on. I have flashes of consciousness being in a truck, and, I'm here. And they called the police, and he made it home safely, thank God, but it remains a, quote, mystery to them, because they ran all sorts of tests looking for, was he drugged, were there chemicals, and they didn't find anything. And that's because, like we always point out, the mainstream just refuses to make the paradigm shift into the 21st century. So they are testing for, things like that. And David Paulides talks about this a lot in his autopsy reports. He said they won't test for the things they need to be testing for. And that's because mainstream medicine, the medical community, are still in primitive times. They're still buying into the old paradigm. And they're not testing for nanotechnologies. They're not even thinking along those lines at all. They only think, oh, well, was he drugged? What are the common causes of something like this? But the intelligence agencies, the corrupt elements and the CIA and the NSA and all the people in the know, they don't want people to wake up to this, because nobody would go take quantum dot technology for this covert thing if they understood all of this. So they are actively suppressing information. And if you happen to be a scientist or a brilliant mind outside of the scientific community in their universities, their re-education camps, and you discover this stuff on your own, then they gaslight you. Oh, that's craziness. You don't believe in science. Listen to our scientist, Bill Nye the Science Guy, tell you how stupid you are, and all that. That's their narrative. They're always like, oh, you don't believe in science. And they're so primitive. They're like cavemen compared to the science that we're talking about in the truth community. But being gaslighted is a small price to pay, because some of these whistleblowers paid with their life. Like at the beginning of my optogenetics video, I mentioned a couple people like CEO Erin Valenti, who was brilliant and ran her own tech company, and she went to a Silicon Valley seminar conference, and after the conference, she called her family ranting, saying, it's the Matrix, it's the Matrix, they're trying to put us all in the Matrix, talking about exactly what we're talking about here. And her family thought she was crazy. They thought she was having a psychotic break. And before she could get on an airplane and make it out of Silicon Valley, she was found dead in her car. And this is just another example, one of those instances like the skier in New York, that to the mainstream, to the people who refuse to join the paradigm shift, it's just a mystery. It's so mysterious. But to those of us who don't operate in fear of ridicule and we just move forward with life and science, these things are no mystery at all.
This is the mystery of how a 49-year-old Canadian firefighter who was skiing at Whiteface Mountain with colleagues in New York went missing one day, only to be found 6 days later alive and in good health, but in Sacramento. According to his friends, on February 7th, Constantinos Danny Philippidis said he wanted to go on one last ski run that day. However, that was the last time they saw him, as he never returned. This prompted a frantic search for Philippidis that included a helicopter, K9 units, and up to 140 trekking through the snowy mountains in the hopes of finding him. At one point, Philippidis apparently bought an iPhone, which he used to call his wife. She urged him to call the police, who eventually caught up with him, reportedly still in his ski clothes, at Sacramento Airport, some 2,900 miles away from where he was last seen. Authorities said Philippidis seemed to be confused and wasn't able to give them direct answers. Here's what they did discover, though. Philippidis didn't remember much, but felt he may have suffered a head injury. He also mentioned that he had been riding in a big rig-style truck and also spent a lot of time sleeping. He also apparently got a haircut. Authorities have distributed this picture of Philippidis taken while he was in California in the hopes that people who recognize him can help fill in what happened when he went missing for 6 days. Perhaps he was simply in a fugue state?
And really, this accounts for a lot of the Mandela effect, that no two of us are seeing the world, perceiving the world the same way, depending on how integrated we already are with the AI. And the younger generation, it's almost impossible to communicate with them. They're in the machine. And it's not really even their fault, because when I was coming up, we took about 3 vaccines. That's all we put in our body. Now they have, what, 70? Just to go through school, they have to have 70 different jabs. Not to mention, like what I'm showing on the screen here, Alienware, of course, that's a coincidence. That they have been trained since birth to live in this virtual reality through gaming and through doing everything on the computer. In fact, I get a lot of questions from people saying, I already had the COVID test, I had the COVID swab, or I already had COVID, or I already had this. What does that mean for me? Well, it means you're in the same boat as the rest of us. It's in all of us. I believe that these are part of the system, the infrastructure of neuralacing us into this AI completely, but we're not quite there yet. We're not quite dead yet. And it's almost over. This is people who cannot adjust to the fact that life is not going back to normal, that they are moving us into their new normal. This is what the Bible talks about. This is biblical. And these are precursors to the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is coming. In fact, if you go to Strong's Concordance and look up that word that we translate mark, one of the optional translations is tattoo. And now we have this invisible quantum nanotechnology tattoo. That will be everything from our identification, holding our medical records, and this, quote, vaccine. And they're broadcasting to us that it should be ready within a year or 2. And then we see these tech giants that, like in the TITANpointe Part 1 video, I laid out their connections to IBM, their connections to DARPA, and they're coming out with patents like Bill Gates' 666 patent. They debunk it. This is the fact check site debunking it. They're like, it does not mention inserting microchips into the body. No kidding, because the nano is already in us. This technology just links into that. And it's odd that they use specific terms in the patent applications like non-invasive devices, which is what Dr. Roger Lear was saying. Why are there no surgical incision points for this stuff? Because it's assembling inside us. So can it assemble in your forehead? And what everybody's talking about, the pineal gland and all of this, Of course it can. But these patents coming from Gates and Bezos, they're for the work camps. This is high-tech human slavery, high-tech work camps. So Bill Gates' patent is for, specifically, the application is for a system whereby tasks are given to the users, which on participation or completion can be rewarded with cryptocurrencies. So, I mean, this is your paycheck. But it won't be like you can sit at your desk and watch YouTube videos and get paid anymore. They want the sensors inside your body, and they detect your heart rate, your temperature, your motion to see if you are performing the task, even linked into your brain waves if you have a desk job. Did you complete the task? And you'll be rewarded with your cryptocurrency, your digital. You can't buy or sell without it. They're laying it out right in front of us. And as far as Bezos and his Amazon warehouse work camps, his patent is for the wristband that can precisely track warehouse employees, uses vibrations to nudge them. It's like, here's your shot collar, put it on, to make sure people don't go to take bathroom breaks too long and all of this. This is all work camp technology. And of course, these patents are from 2018. Now we know these won't be devices. The devices that they're so ambiguous about, and that'll be these nano implants. Okay, so I want to jump back to the alien implants that Dr. Lear was taking out and these quote unquote alien abductions. I want to play this little clip from Dr. Carla Turner. She also has since passed away, but she was way ahead of her time in the 1990s. Now, keep in mind, these are the best video games right here on the screen from 1990. These giant pixel, this is how primitive our computer systems were then. So for her to be making analysis like this about the alien abductions and virtual reality and finding connections like that, she was way, way ahead of her time. And she had a totally different take on it than all of the mainstream, like MUFON and the UFO community and all of that. She was a PhD. She gave up. In fact, her first book was called Into the Fringe. It was about giving up her career at the university because they weren't allowed to talk about these sciences. But she was so far ahead of her time, she had to. This was her calling. And of course, it cost her life. Here's one of her books, Masquerade of Angels. So she was on to it decades before. And don't let it escape you that the researchers that have a different take on it, like I just showed you, Dr. Roger Lear and Dr. Carla Turner, they were all cancered. And they were replaced with plants in the UFO research community, like Dr. Stephen Greer, who says all of the aliens are friendly. They're all our friends. They're just our saviors, and we should just welcome this. And we should channel demons. I mean, aliens. We should channel them. And as far as the Nazi Lebensborn breeding program, is it really a coincidence that, okay, this is Dr. Stephen Greer, and this is Warren Jeffs, the Mormon cult leader convicted of child sex assault, and this is Lawrence Krauss, the physicist that they parade around, right? Our scientists, we must believe in science. And of course, he's an anti-theist, a euphemism for anti-Christ. So I'm sure it's just a coincidence that they look like triplets, or at least brothers from the same gene pool. But anyway, back to the late Dr. Carla Turner and Dr. Roger Lear, and these implants, and they're linked to virtual reality.
With their advanced technology, the aliens can create virtual reality scenarios that are usually absolutely real to the perceptions of the targeted abductee. Now, such capabilities have often been theorized and hypothesized and discussed in this field, but for me, they were confirmed in an extraordinary case, multiple case, that I have helped research for the last couple of years, involving an abductee named Ted Rice. This is the one story I do intend to tell in detail before going on. In the early 1990s, Ted was in Florida visiting an old friend named Marie, and she had also invited a third friend, a woman named Frances, as a house guest. Ted was in one room. Marie and Frances went to bed in twin beds in the other room. Shortly after going to bed, Ted heard his hostess Marie screaming, "Ted, come here quick." And he hopped up out of bed, ran down the hallway, and as he approached the other bedroom, he could see a blue glow coming through the open bedroom doorway. When he walked inside, he saw a very strange situation. His host, Marie, was pinned as far away, up against the wall, as far away from the bed area as she could, staring fixed at one of the twin beds in which Francis was still lying. The bed was surrounded by a large, spherical, blue energy field of some sort through which little lights seemed to dart and move. Francis was raised in a slightly raised position just as she had been starting to sit up in the bed and had been paralyzed in that position. Ted and Marie yelled at her, "Are you in pain? Can we help you? What's wrong?" She could barely hear them, and when she did answer them, they could barely hear her, and this is in a small bedroom. She, for several minutes, they observed, was carrying on a conversation with the ceiling. And then a few minutes later, she was carrying on a conversation with the foot of her bed. A few more minutes passed, and the sphere of electrical energy disappeared, and Francis was able to move again. When she sat up, she told them what she had been experiencing. It had begun, she said, hearing the sound of a helicopter low over the house. And in fact, she had turned to her hostess, Marie, and said, "What's a helicopter doing over the house this low, this time of night?" Marie said, "What helicopter? I don't hear anything. You're dreaming. Go back to sleep." Francis said, "No, don't you hear that helicopter?" At that point, she had started to sit up. That's when the blue sphere of energy had coalesced around the bed. Francis told them after this was over that it had seemed as if the ceiling dissolved or disappeared, and I've heard this over and over and over again, and she could see through the ceiling up to the trees above the house where there was a strange craft. She had thought it was a copter when she heard the sound, but as she looked up, it was not like any copter she had ever seen. And within this were two alien creatures, which she described in physical detail, with which she carried on a conversation for several minutes. And then, she said, they came out of the craft and beamed down to the foot of the bed. Didn't you see them? And where she carried on another few minutes of conversation. When the sphere disappeared, so did the aliens, so did the invisible ceiling, and so did the strange craft. Francis had not been able to see the blue sphere of light around the bed. All she had seen was a craft, heard noises, had a conversation with two alien entities. Marie and Ted, who were outside of this field watching this, saw and heard only the blue sphere. If they had not been in the room to observe this, Francis would have believed with all sincerity that she had had exactly the encounter she thought she had, but she didn't.
So anyway, these buildings were built by AT&T originally as these AT&T longline hubs, which we talked about already in part 1 of TITANpointe. But AT&T was the first one to introduce us to this fiber optic technology, that information could be carried on this light. And then we moved on to talk about the Starlink system being put overhead by Elon Musk and how these frequencies can be beamed wirelessly now with Wi-Fi instead of through the tubes, which led us into talking about exactly what Dr. Carla Turner is talking about here, that this Wi-Fi technology has been common in UFO experiences, especially linked into Project Bluebeam. It's common that people will report seeing a blue beam come out of the bottom of the craft and hit them, and then they have this experience that is very real to them. And maybe we all know that the Nephilim races and the demigods and all of this, that's all true. And I'm also not saying that every single encounter with these UFOs is a virtual reality encounter. There's no doubt that several of these people are actually being abducted. Some of them are taken by these cryptid humanoid species that we call aliens, these hybrids, and some of them are military abductions by this deep state, which are continuing the same types of experiments that we saw in the camps in Nazi Germany, only now they're way, way high tech. So I certainly do not deny that some of these missing time experiences are people actually being taken for a multitude of reasons. In fact, some of those, like the super soldiers, report that they'll be living their life along like normal. Then all of a sudden the switch is flipped and they'll have to sort of report to duty, which makes you question things like this firefighter that left the skiing lodge and then showed up somewhere else in the country 6 days later with a haircut, like a military haircut. What was he doing for 6 days? Was he just asleep, like you said, the whole time? Maybe some of these missing time events are these Manchurian candidates. Maybe they're not all being experimented on. Maybe some of them are actually doing some sort of covert missions that they simply don't remember. In fact, that's one of the correlations that David Paulides has mentioned in his Missing 411 series. Although he doesn't acknowledge any of the types of subjects like we're talking about here today, he does mention that an inordinate amount of these strange disappearances are people of German descent, even small children. He also mentions another trend that many of them are highly intelligent people in very technical fields, like the 62-year-old German physics professor that was a highly skilled mountaineer and all of that, yet he was one of these that just vanished without a trace. So I acknowledge that many of these encounters are physical encounters and not just virtual encounters. But this technology that they are trying to link into us, it's a very common report that UFO abductees say that this light will come out, this blue beam or other colored beam will come out of the craft and hit them. And then they have this experience. So I'm just saying, does this not look like exactly the same thing to you? This would be a depiction of a UFO abductee encounter. And this is an advertisement for Li-Fi that they are rolling out to replace our Wi-Fi in these smart cities where the LED lights beam the information down, and that's our connection to the internet. Now, honestly, is that not basically the same exact thing?
But what does our surgeon, Dr. Day, mean by hooked up to the cloud? Many different transhumanism patents had already been filed years before the COVID pandemic was ever heard of, for governments, banks, and corporations to hook their humans and animals up directly to the Internet of Things through the upcoming 5G and 6G smart grids and smart cities in order to track, monitor, and control all resources on the planet. The 2012 and 2015 AT&T U.S. Patent 101-63055B2 was for routing policies for biological hosts, products to provide interfaces between intra-host networks and inter-host nanosmart dust networks within biological hosts, utilizing neuro-regional translations performed to route communications to and from the biological hosts. AT&T U.S. Patent 201-301-42363 was for devices and methods for transferring data through a human body using short-range 5G millimeter wave communications through Bluetooth and other devices by transferring data signals through the bones and skin of a human user by placing a piezoelectric transducer microphone on or inside the body that could even occur through two human bodies making physical contact.
Okay, let me break in real quick here. I just want to make sure you take note of two things. One is that these are AT&T patents, the same AT&T that built these giant structures all over our nation. Okay, now this is where it gets really weird, as if all of this isn't really weird when you realize that you've been lied to your entire life about the very nature of reality. Okay, so notice in that AT&T patent that it talks about these vibrations, frequencies that contain a data signal through a user's body. The application's description also suggests that data communications could occur through two human bodies making physical contact. Now that's an actual AT&T patent. I just showed you the number from the patent office. You can go and research it yourself. So now it's just considered science. People understand transhumanism and all of this. But many of you, if you're well researched, probably remember that about 3 decades ago, a handful of whistleblowers came out claiming to be part of a CIA experimental project called Project Monarch. And again, MKUltra is not a conspiracy theory. There were congressional hearings on it. It's been completely admitted to by now. You can go to the official government website and check it out, or you can go to Wikipedia or anywhere. This is real. Project MKUltra, also called the CIA Mind Control Program, is a code name given to a program of experiments on human subjects that were designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, some of which were illegal. But anyway, the official story is that they were developing drugs and procedures to be used in interrogations in order to weaken an individual or force confessions and that type of thing, truth serums and all that. That was the cover story. The project was organized through the Office of Scientific Intelligence of the CIA and coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. Biological warfare, right? Like we're going through right now with the CCP virus. But these are projects from all the way back in the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s. There were 149 sub-projects of MKUltra, and Project Monarch was one of those. So anyway, a couple decades ago, people started coming forward, women started coming forward with these strange tales. I mean, you have to admit, they sound crazy, but they were saying that they were used to transfer information through body-to-body contact, that they were sent by their handlers to have sex with world leaders and royal families and things of that nature. But they told these crazy tales about how it wasn't just about being prostitutes, but it was about being thumb drives, basically, that they were nothing more than couriers of, quote, mind files that were somehow transmitted into them through some form of telecommunications and data transfer that they did not understand, but they knew their job. And I guess in some respects, then the CIA cover story is true. Who needs interrogation to get the truth out of somebody if you can access their mind files through body-to-body contact? But yeah, as crazy as it seemed back in the 1960s and 1970s, that's what these CIA whistleblowers said they were used for. Now, doesn't that sound exactly like what the AT&T patent says? The application's description also suggests that data communications could occur through two human bodies making physical contact. This is one of them right here on the screen, Kathy O'Brien. Here's her when she was on the circuit telling her story, and then on the left when she was a little younger. Another one was Bryce Taylor. This picture here on the right is when she was young and she was sex trafficked, and this is her when she was making the circuit here on the left when she was a little older. Her real name turned out to be Sue Ford, but when she first came out with her story, she was scared and on the run for her life, and her daughter was institutionalized, and it's just a really sad story. Here's another picture of her in the middle when she was a younger woman. She claims that she was used when she was a young teenager and probably younger, but she was also used at this age when she was a young mother, and her daughter were both used, that it was a generational MKUltra program. And if you haven't heard their whistleblower testimony, here are their books. Kathy O'Brien's book is called Transformation of America, True Life Story of a Mind Control Slave. And here's Bryce Taylor's book. It's called Thanks for the Memories, The Truth Has Set Me Free, The Memoirs of Bob Hope's and Henry Kissinger's Mind Control Slave. Because her testimony is that when she was a young teenage girl, that these were her handlers, Henry Kissinger and Bob Hope, and essentially they owned her. She called them her owners, and that they would use her to send and receive messages between powerful world leaders. Essentially, she said they were doing what we have found out now that Jeffrey Epstein was doing. If you guys watch this video on the screen, my Jeffrey Epstein connections you won't see on the news. As I've mentioned a million times, I talked a lot in there about his foundation, his scientific foundation, making all of these multi-million-dollar contributions to different projects at Harvard, and even Chinese technologies like ECOG that are their mind control technologies. So again, hindsight being 2020, this brings a lot of credence to the whistleblower testimonies of Bryce Taylor and Kathy O'Brien. You can see Kathy's book was published in 1995 and Bryce's was published in 1999. So when they were telling their stories, it seemed, crazy. A CIA mind control sex slave with these young teenage girls. But now that Epstein Island and the Lolita Express and all that has come to light, it does sound like all the way back to the 1960s and 70s that people like Henry Kissinger and other Hollywood celebrities were involved in the same exact thing that Jeffrey Epstein was carrying on right up till the present. Virginia Roberts and the other girls said the exact same things that Bryce and Kathy said, that they were trafficked to these royal families, to these powerful politicians, world leaders, all of this type of stuff. Now, they didn't talk about transferring information through body-to-body contact, but they wouldn't have to know about it because they also all reported being forced to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein, which is the way that the early days whistleblowers said that they transferred the information. They were literally like a thumb drive. They would gain the information through body-to-body contact, sexual contact with their target, with these powerful people, and that would somehow upload the information into them, and they were just the courier of the quote mind files back to their handler or owner, with whom then they had sex, and they would download that information to them. And from that point, they don't know technologically how they decoded it. And that's exactly the terminology they used. Here's Bryce's, let me see. Sex slaves, prostitutes, couriers, or mind files accessible only to the person who knows the special, quote, codes that will access the, quote, program. And that took place in the much higher ranks of the cabal and the intelligence agencies, not at the level of the teenage girls. So what do you think? You think it's just a coincidence that after all of these decades, my entire lifetime, Henry Kissinger has been all up in our Secret Service. Kissinger has been a top defense advisor to president after president after president after president in the establishment. Republican, Democrat, didn't matter. Kissinger always stayed in. The president changed, but Kissinger always stayed in above every president, advising every president. Until Donald Trump. The Trump team removes members of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board, including former Secretaries of State Henry Kissinger and Madeleine Albright. Likewise, after all the years and years of crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, and everybody turned a blind eye to it and they let him go, it's during Donald Trump's administration that federal charges finally come down and they arrest him? And now Ghislaine Maxwell too? You guys really think all this is a coincidence? Nothing's going on. Nothing at all. And of course, Project Monarch didn't stop in Hollywood after Bob Hope. It's rumored to still be rampant in everything from the modeling agencies to the actresses to the Disney kids. And that's why we see all these strange photo shoots, just like we see with them always covering the one eye or doing the 666 over one eye. They are literally advertising. It's like Paris Hilton. Everybody's like, what the heck is she famous for? Paris Hilton has never done anything. Why is she famous? But Paris Hilton, still to this day, she gets paid to go over to a Saudi prince or whatever to make an appearance, right? Anyway, just typical Illuminati symbolism. Here's tons of examples. Oh, but talk about advertising. This is the perfect example of what we're talking about right here. This is Naomi Campbell. Look at all of the monarch butterflies. She's literally wearing them like jewels in her crown. Now here is one page of the flight logs from Epstein's Lolita Express. And most people see Bill Clinton's name, and that's the most important name here, but you can see Naomi Campbell's name as well, and others, and 10 Secret Service agents. You can see lots of people. But as far as Naomi Campbell, I don't think she was going to the island to take part in any sort of, you know, the forbidden word. I think she was the monarch, that she was being delivered to somebody, as she's a supermodel, and she was doing exactly what Bryce and Kathy said that they use these monarchs for. Oh, look, and here's the name John Roberts. Keep this in mind for here in a minute when I get to the evidence that Lynn Wood dropped. The new whistleblower testimony from somebody inside the intelligence agencies explaining what we saw happen with both Mike Pence and Supreme Court Justice John Roberts. I'll try to remember to put the evidence, like the logbooks and all of that, in that segment when we get to it. But if you guys knew what it takes for me to do these videos, that sometimes I have over 150 files open. I screen capture everything because, you know, they scrub the internet so fast. So I screen capture everything, and then I file all of the recordings into files and stuff. So when I go to make one of these, I have to pull the evidence from, you know, multiple files. And sometimes it's just easier to just pop it in when I'm thinking of it, in case I forget to go back and grab it when I'm laying out that segment. Anyway, back to this AT&T patent, talking about this crazy high-tech form of telecommunications using the person's skin and bones. And if you research Bryce Taylor's information, you'll come across these precursors to this sort of patent, this psychoelectronic weapon effects and all the parts of the body, and the human body resonance frequencies, how the human body, if you break it down almost like a robot. I mean, look, some of these documents are from back in 1974, which is about the same time that NSA building, AT&T building, that windowless telecommunications fortress there in New York, I think it was built in 1974. In fact, I think all of this that we've been talking about through the TITANpointe series kind of makes me lean toward AT&T has never been a phone company or a telecommunications company. The fact that they had the fiber optics, the stuff we only saw in UFOs, this information being transmitted by light, first through fiber optics and then through Wi-Fi, just beaming down on people. The fact that they had that technology first, the fact that they are involved in the 5G rollout, the fact that they are involved in patents like this that we see from the CIA all the way back in the 60s and 70s. In my humble opinion, it looks like AT&T is just another CIA front company, or another DARPA front company, just like Amazon is DARPA, just like Facebook is DARPA, CIA. It is my opinion that the entire AT&T empire has always been. It's not that the NSA took over, like they took over those AT&T buildings after they were done with them for long line hubs or anything like that. I think it's always been NSA. I think it's always been CIA. I think it's always been DARPA. And of course, lest we forget that AT&T also owns CNN and a lot of the surface level mind control, which we call propaganda. Back in 2016, right before the election, AT&T quickly snatched up an $85 billion group of media companies. And in fact, in 2017, the Department of Justice under Trump filed a lawsuit to stop the merger, but the judge allowed it. So AT&T also owns HBO, Cinemax, Home Box Office, TBS, True TV, TCM, Adult Swim, the Cartoon Network, an entire division, AYAKM, of young adult and kids media, CNN, HLN, DC Entertainment and DC Films, including all the Batman movies. DC, don't let that escape you. That's one of those CIA comedy infusement agency things. They openly call it. It's DC Entertainment and DC Films. Turner Broadcasting International, Turner Sports, March Madness, the NBA playoffs. See, this is why you see all of this stuff with the kneeling and the painting BLM on all the courts and all of this stuff, is because this is all owned by the same people. And like we've been talking about, they always use these protests in every single nation they overthrow. The Arab Spring, it was all about a change of regime in all of those nations. What we are seeing in Myanmar right now, after they used Smartmatic machines to falsify that election, and now we see oh, well, people are protesting. That's what our media tells us. Well, that's them over there. That's their Antifa and stuff. That leader that just got removed from office in Myanmar, that's how she got her name. That's how she made a name for herself, was she organized and headed these protest groups. And she was actually arrested then for that, for violence and everything. And she was on house arrest with an ankle bracelet then, with an ankle monitor then. And guess who stepped in? Barack Obama stepped in and threatened to put sanctions on Myanmar unless they released her and gave her a position in their government. And now that the military has taken control of the country and removed that entire government until they can hold another election, the protests that our media keep telling us, oh, the citizens don't agree with it, that's absolutely not so. The protesters are the same ones that lady led, that she was the leader of, that she organized. So it would be equivalent to our Antifa and BLM here. One thing that a lot of people don't realize about the Ukraine, besides this Biden laptop deal and all that, is that the same exact thing happened in Ukraine. The nation was in uproar over protests, and they had a fraudulent election in the Ukraine. Again, eerily similar to what we see going on in our nation. The Orange Revolution, a series of protests that took place in the immediate aftermath of a presidential election, which was claimed to be marred by massive corruption, voter intimidation, and electoral fraud. The Ukrainian capital was the focal point of the movement's campaign of civil resistance. The nationwide protests succeeded when the results of the original runoff were annulled, and a revote was ordered by Ukraine's Supreme Court. So I know that sounds like what we're all wishing will happen here, with Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood's cases being held or being heard by the Supreme Court. I think it's February 19th. Is that right? We'll talk about it here in a little bit when we get to them. So that was good news. And they did rehold the election. And as it turns out, the right-wing candidate did win the national election by more than 8 points, I think. But everything didn't go back to normal just because of the Supreme Court decision and the new election and the right-wing presidential candidate being seated. It wasn't rainbows and spring flowers. It was instead battles and protests for 10 years, from 2004 to 2014. And then Russia invaded. I mean, they call it annexation, but Crimea doesn't call it annexation. They called it terrorism. Russian soldiers literally came in with guns and took their capital. And of course, all of this happened in the Ukraine while Biden was in office last time, when he was vice president under Barack Obama, 2014. The Crimean Peninsula, north of the Black Sea in Eastern Europe, was annexed by the Russian Federation between February and March of 2014. The annexation from Ukraine followed a Russian military intervention. On the 23rd of February, pro-communist, pro-Russian demonstrations were held in the Crimean city. On the 27th of February, masked Russian troops without insignias took over the Supreme Council, the parliament, took over the parliament of Crimea and captured strategic sites all across Crimea, which led to the installation of the pro-Russian government in Crimea. So when they couldn't do it by election fraud, they did it by force. And obviously I mention all of that because most of us know that the Lord has given thousands upon thousands of prophetic dreams and visions to his servants about this coming Russian and Chinese invasion of the United States of America. And many of these warnings through great men of God came decades and decades ago. For example, Dimitri Duduman, David Wilkerson, Henry Groover, and likewise, I had mine. I probably posted mine. It's a couple years ago when I talked about it. I said 5 years ago, and that's been like 3 years. So it's probably about 9 years ago that the Lord gave me my series about Russia and about China and about the invasion coming on the East Coast. I had another one of a newscast with red rings around New York, New Jersey area and Washington, D.C. area. I don't know what that was. There was no sound. I was just seeing a TV with a news broadcaster and the map came up. So something had happened in that area. Like I said, I specifically saw Russians processing us prisoners of war on American soil through hospitals, what looked like anyway, sterile, like hospital sort of environments. I saw Chinese, Asian soldiers with white buses transporting Americans to work camps. And in that vision specifically, before I saw that, I saw riots in the street, people throwing things at police. We were locked in our homes. We had curfews. It was like martial law. There were military vehicles. There were roadblocks. I saw all of that in the same vision. And I saw that all of our cell phone and internet, although we had cell phone and internet, was all being monitored, which harkens back to what I'm talking about right here, this control network where they watch every text message, every phone call, every comment on social media. They watched everything. And that's in the vision. That's how I ended up in the work camp. They came for me and my family specifically because I used my phone for unauthorized purposes. And again, all of that is on my YouTube channel. Multiple times I've talked about it through multiple videos, but the initial posting where I told about the prophetic vision is timestamped on YouTube, showing that, yeah, the Lord showed me this probably 8 years before where we're at right now. So in my opinion, presently, that's my interpretation, is this is what we're getting ready to go into. And here's one I posted back in 2015. So what, like 6 years ago? But I had it about 20 years ago. And that's the one I often talk about where I saw these, what I thought were nuclear attacks on major cities. And since the Holy Spirit took me to this green field where I was safe to see this happen from a distance in city after city after city, I wasn't up close, and I've wrestled over the years thinking, am I thinking of that wrong? Was that maybe meteors that were hitting the earth and that's what these giant clouds were? Because it was enormous. The explosion, the clouds were enormous. So I wasn't right there. I can't say 100% that they were nuclear bombs. I didn't see missiles or anything like that. I just was shown what I perceived at the time to be a bombing of major city after major city after major city, and it was organized all at one time, seconds apart, sort of like we saw on 9/11, where we saw New York hit and we saw the Pentagon hit, and then the third one didn't make it to its target. But it was like that. They were within seconds of each other. So all of these years, I just sort of assumed if you see bombs go off on American soil, I just always sort of assumed that it must be the enemy bombing those cities. But hindsight being 2020 and knowing what I know now about these control towers that are very literally part of the Antichrist beast system, literally controlling people like Manchurian candidates, through these nano neural implants and stuff, it makes me rethink. Nothing I saw said that it was the enemy that did that. And could this be part of the war where our military is taking out strategic targets for our own good? I don't know. Like I said, I was not shown. I'm just saying, like I said at the end of last video, now it's making me reconsider that maybe these were the major cities that I saw. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be as easy as the They Live movie where Roddy Piper just took out like a dish, like a satellite cable network dish or something off of a tower that was broadcasting the signal. These are fortresses with bunkers that are reinforced to withstand this type of thing. And it's so complicated because in the They Live movie, he could just, without hurting other humans, he could just go up and take out, the satellite dish. But in the situation that we're in now, to take these things out would cause collateral damage. So think about it. If you were the military generals and you were the people in charge, how would you deconstruct this thing with the least amount of collateral damage? And what if it gets to the point where they do pass the legislation to make the jab mandatory, and the entire population gets into this situation where, like people have seen with the zombie apocalypse dreams, where they are hive mind using crowds to attack warehouses, to take out entire city blocks, like I talked about in the optogenetics video, to take out police stations, government buildings, courthouses, through sort of hive mind Manchurian candidate agitators. Or like the prophetic vision I mentioned earlier, where the sort of zombie group of like 40 people were trying to make it to the water supply, the city's water supply. They were climbing the fences, the police were fighting them, and it was a crowd trying to make it to the water supply, which, by the way, is something that just happened on February 8th of 2021, just a couple days ago, where somebody hacked into the computer system that controls the different chemicals that they put in the water supply, and upped the content of one of the chemicals like 1,000%, which would make it completely poisonous and toxic. Luckily, somebody caught it. But again, it was a remote access, just like we were talking about with Hammer and Scorecard, and how these different countries are able to get into our computer networks now. In fact, Israel had a similar attack on their water supply that they blamed on Iran accessing it. Honestly, we're coming up on a point, and probably already here, because AI is so much further along than they have told us. And even though the major cities aren't completely smart cities yet, everything is computerized. Every bank, every government agency, every water supply system, every store supply chain, it's all already on a computer system. So, it makes you wonder, at what point do we stop investigating, is this a human that is remotely accessing these different systems? And could it be AI itself, like the Terminator Judgment Day sort of scenario, or the HAL 9000?
Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it. I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me.
So just think about it. What if you were the generals? What if you were the one sitting in the Pentagon? What if you were in the Secret Service? What if you had to make these types of decisions? And you knew that you could shut off this signal that is controlling, keeping people in a trance, entire populations in a trance, and that may stop these mobs that are attacking all of the cities and all of this, that you could literally set a nation free by taking out, these broadcasts, these telecommunication hubs. But the only problem is that they're right in the middle of major population centers. They built them right in the middle of the most populous cities in our nation. The same way in war abroad, like over in the Middle East, that these terrorist groups will hide their weapons in schools, in hospitals, and then when the Allies take out those strategic locations, then they say, oh, look, they're bombing civilians, look, they're all of this. Well, what if this happened on our soil? The type of bunker buster that it would take to get the many levels deep that these things are, and then also them being reinforced to withstand any sort of conventional warfare. How would you take out a target of this size without just unbelievable collateral damage? And if you're weighing the lesser of two evils, what do you do? Do you let the entire nation, say 300-400 million people, be mind slaves under this type of a thing? You have to weigh that loss, which is total loss because the Antichrist system is total loss, not just of mind, but of soul, eternal life, total loss. Do you allow that to continue because you can't sacrifice, however many people are in the major cities? What would you do? What a quagmire to be in. Can you even imagine the complexity of having to make these types of decisions? And that's a rhetorical question, just food for thought. Please do not answer below in the comments what you would do, especially if it has to do with bombing anything. One, it'll go down on your permanent record. You got to know that.
I hope you know that this will go down on your permanent record.
Now they are holding creators accountable for even their comment sections. So if a whole bunch of people start saying stuff like that, especially on the heels of what's going on since January 6th, it could cause me a lot of problems. So it's a rhetorical question. It's just food for thought about how complex and fluid this situation really is. And I have to say, I certainly am not encouraging any sort of action toward any of these buildings or anything like that. We're just having a discussion. If anybody sees this and has any wild ideas about going there or something, please don't bother. You're never going to have access to the levels that this stuff is actually on. And every time that we discuss topics like this and a handful of radicals run out and do something like the 77 forbidden letter, forbidden number, mobile towers that were burned down right here. 5G coronavirus conspiracy theory leads to 77 mobile towers being burned down. That didn't stop the infrastructure from going up at all. All it did was make us look like what they say we are. And it gave them the excuse they were looking for to ban all speech, to where now we have to say, the forbidden number and the forbidden letter, like we can't even speak about it anymore. So please do everybody a favor and keep your head on. There are ways to dismantle this thing legally and ethically. That's what all of these executive orders that President Trump was passing about Huawei, to get Huawei banned from all of our 5G network, and the UK has also banned Huawei. They have to go back in their infrastructure that they already use these Chinese components in and go back and retool all of it. So they're working on it. And then also we have the cyber warfare units who are launching algorithms, who are trying to kill the beast that way. And just like in those videos that I put up back in late November, early December, I showed the live footage of these algorithms being launched worldwide, hundreds. It was just a crazy attack. They did release the Kraken.
Are you watching this, folks? This is real-time evidence of a massive DDoS attack on the entire internet. I have never seen anything like this. We are witnessing an attack on a grand scale. This is absolute chaos. YouTube is down, websites are down, Verizon is down, Netflix is down, all these websites are going down. Look at the number of attacks, folks. We're over 270. I cannot even follow this, and it's coming from all over the world. A massive DDoS attack on the entire world. This is a website that tracks people having problems accessing websites, and you can see that YouTube, YouTube TV, YouTube Music, Google, Comcast, Google Play, Verizon, many other big websites like Netflix and Twitter, all of them were being attacked by this DDoSing.
So we do still have other options. And obviously they are using them, or there never would have been a release to us, the general public, letting us know that they did know that China and these other communist countries were into our military and Pentagon and all of that through SolarWinds. We never would have heard anything about it unless they wanted us to. Because the cabal was working overtime, parading Chris Krebs around on the circuit. I mean, everything, whether it was comedy shows, specials, just about him, all of the mainstream Mockingbird media. It was nonstop, like 24/7 broadcast from the deep state with Chris Krebs, the cybersecurity head that Trump fired. He was going around bad-mouthing Trump, saying that, oh, everything was so secure. I mean, Chris Krebs, cybersecurity chief, says that no nations ever could get into our systems because he was watching things and it was the most secure in all of world history. So it wasn't that they didn't know about solar winds and that they hadn't been investigating this. It was that they chose to release that information to us so that we would say, oh yeah, Chris Krebs, everything was so secure that these foreign nations were even in our Pentagon and every branch of our military. And we see the same thing in Taiwan, who is an ally, because this is all one big picture and the puzzle pieces all fit together. But yeah, Taiwan discovered that by using Huawei and other Chinese parts in all of their technology, in their military, and their own surveillance systems, they found that China had linked in, had put back doors in all of that equipment, so that then every surveillance system that they had sold parts to, Chinese made parts to, then they could link in and use that surveillance system that they didn't even have to build. So Taiwan has been fighting that. They're trying to get out from under the thumb of China, but in doing that, they found that China is in everything. China sees their every military move. China sees all of it. Right here, July of 2020, so like in the last 6-7 months, Taiwan's Apple Daily, owned by Hong Kong's pro-democracy media tycoon, you know, Hong Kong, they've been having the protests. They're trying to get free from China's thumb too. Claims that Huawei equipment is being used in a Taiwanese military project to install solar panels and related environmental control systems, yada, yada, yada. So this Huawei equipment and all of these other Chinese made parts are in all of this green infrastructure, right? That's why they're pushing this green agenda. We need to change everything over, right, to these solar panels and all this green agenda. That's what the leftists in our country are saying, and in their country and in every country. And that's to install all of these Huawei made systems, because this is part of the smart city infrastructure. They have to be in everything, in your temperature controls, in your refrigerator, in everything. And of course, as soon as Biden was installed, I mean, he set that pin on fire. It was smoking, overturning everything that Trump did to harden our infrastructure, including talk about possibly loosening restrictions around U.S. firms doing business with the Chinese manufacturer Huawei. Biden's nominee for Commerce Secretary pledged to protect U.S. telecom networks from Chinese firms, but declined to commit to keeping Huawei on a trade blacklist. So this is why politics really are important. I know that, we've been talking about a lot of really deep stuff, spiritual stuff, eternal stuff, and it's hard to jump right into something as superficial as politics. But these players on the world stage, as we'll talk about with Myanmar again here in a minute, these politicians, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, these players that we see in our politics are also players in this spiritual battle. These ruling families, the ruling class that the Bible calls the kings of the earth, they have a purpose. Revelation 17:13. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive 1 hour of authority as kings along with the beast. These kings have one purpose: to yield their power to the authority of the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and he will be accompanied by his called and chosen and faithful ones. Hey, that's us. You can't tell me there aren't any white hats. In fact, they've been systematically making arrests all over the world and putting pressure on them to take plea deals by giving over evidence so that they can get the next one up the chain and the next one up the chain. And if you're paying attention, you can see they've been working on this for years. They already arrested the top Huawei executive. This is real. Here's Huawei's CFO, the daughter of the multi-billionaire founder, the richest, highest echelon. And there she is in her ankle bracelet. They did finally let her out on bail, but she has to wear this ankle monitor. She's on house arrest. But she does get to, it's what they call partial house arrest. She still gets to come and go certain essential places, but she has to wear the ankle monitor. So, when people in the Q movement have cited this stuff going on, is it impossible that people, the richest people in other countries, might actually be out and have some semblance of coming and going and being caught with ankle monitors on? Everybody's wearing these boots. But suddenly, after the election bleep is complete, then Biden shows up with this big thing covering one of his ankles. I know. The mainstream media told you he was just playing with his dog and happened to hurt his ankle. And we know the Mockingbird media never lies to us. Never. And then we see during Joe Biden giving a speech, there's a hot mic moment where Hunter Biden is caught in the room having a conversation about a plea deal. And we'll talk more about whether that was on accident or on purpose here in a minute when we talk about Project Veritas and Blackwater, who have operatives, undercover operatives in all of the social media companies, all of it. But anyway, here's the clip if you haven't heard it.
Javier Becerra, excuse me, our nominee for Secretary of Health.
So just so you know my life, as
Dr.
we're waiting to do this, I just agreed to...
Dr. Rochelle Walensky, she's going to be the director for the Centers for Disease Control. Javier Becerra, excuse me, our nominee for Secretary of Health and Human Services.
And of course, we saw the same thing with Hillary and with John McCain a couple years ago. And people say, oh, well, that was a couple years ago. If something was going to happen. What? I just showed you that the CFO of Huawei has been wearing her ankle bracelet since 2018. This has been going on for years. People are taking plea deals. People are turning state's evidence. They're building cases. This is really, I can't say this, is covering up an ankle bracelet. I mean, of course it could be a coincidence. And yeah, the Ellen DeGeneres might just be, on COVID lockdown with a giant pack of cigarettes in her tube sock under her pant leg. I don't know. I know that tons of their sloppy propaganda never makes sense, and it doesn't make us weird to have eyeballs in our head and say, okay, if John McCain really did hurt his right leg, and that's why he has this thing always covering his pant leg here, then why is it in this picture on the other leg? And then when confronted and asked about it, he says, oh, I had to give my right leg a rest, so I just put it on my left leg, like to sit down and rest. And wore it that way all day. Suddenly this leg's healed. He can walk on his right leg perfectly. It's completely healed. It's not even swollen. And when he sat down in the chair and just happened to swap him over to give his leg a rest, well, the tennis shoe that he swapped over from his left foot just magically turned into a right foot tennis shoe. Oh, that's right. He carries an extra tennis shoe in his suit jacket pocket. And then when he took his left tennis shoe off, he just threw it back here in the bushes. I mean, it's just... I don't know. Yeah, it could all be a coincidence, and he could have had a miracle healing on this ankle so that he could give it a break and put the boot on this ankle. I don't know. But the things that I do know for a fact, I want to share with you, and that's that this regime, who is completely tied to this regime, this entire government has been arrested. And most of them have been released back to their homes on house arrest with ankle monitors right now, today. This is a fact. And they didn't just arrest like their capital. They went through all the provinces and arrested the governors. The governors. Have we seen anything with certain governors in certain states in our country? So whether it'll happen here, I can't guarantee that, but I can guarantee it did happen here. And the Trump administration knew about the communist coup in Burma/Myanmar, that they were using these Smartmatic machines back in 2017 to falsify election results and install a communist regime. Mike Pompeo says the U.S. has concerns about Myanmar elections and will closely monitor the process. They did that in 2017. And then, as we all know, in 2018, President Trump signed the executive order in our country, saying that if there's foreign interference in U.S. elections, this is what's going to happen.
As for the reason given by the military coup, it is a very familiar word, election fraud. On the one hand, if there was fraud, what is interesting is that some people were really worried before the Myanmar election. Pompeo once said that the US government has concerns for the election in Myanmar, and they will be paying close attention to it. And also the Smartmatic was helping Myanmar in polls in 2017. Think for a moment, that photo showing Aung San Suu Kyi holding Hillary with her left hand and Obama with her right hand. And think of the fact that she also called China a broke country. It is complicated, isn't it? What do you think?
Okay, China's backyard is on fire. Here's the map. This is China, right? This is the area in question. And they are a key player in the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. You know, we discussed that in the first video about the power outages in Pakistan. Okay, so really, this is the woman in question, the leader in question. Their government there that is now on house arrest is directly involved with our government. You can see the picture right here I have on the screen of her with Obama and Hillary Clinton back when Obama was in office. Now, this woman here, who is now accused of genocide and everything else, she has been arrested and imprisoned over there in that country before she rose to power this time. Years and years ago, at the same time that Barack Obama was president and Joe Biden was in the White House too, this woman was arrested then and put on house arrest, just like we saw the Huawei CFO, and President Barack Obama intervened.
She was arrested several times in the 1990s and 2000s for subversive acts due to her involvement in riots against the Burmese government. Then President Barack Obama strongly supported her, advocating her release from house arrest. The Obama administration sanctioned Burma and insisted that sanctions be lifted only if Aung San Suu Kyi played a political role in Burma. Obama's support contributed to Aung San Suu Kyi's rise to power in 2015. Another key ally of Aung San Suu Kyi is billionaire George Soros, whose Open Society Foundation has had a Burma project since 1994 and has been working for years to undermine the Burmese government. Myanmar's 11 Media reports that more than 100 NGOs active in Burma have received funding from Soros. Aung San Suu Kyi is the de facto leader of the country, despite being constitutionally ineligible to do so.
So she came out originally as a social justice warrior. And that's why Obama and Hillary set her up as this big social justice warrior, like we see BLM and these Antifa and stuff movements here, or like Obama's Bill Ayers, remember the Weather Underground? They used to blow up government buildings. But you know, they love this kind of stuff. Now, the problem right now is the same thing we're going through, that the media, the communist-run media across the world are, you know, putting her up as a victim. They are condemning the fact that they declared a state of emergency here and the military has come in to take control of the country until they can set up the new election. They said all of it shouldn't take more than a year. But the communist propaganda machine set up her image. They gave her a Nobel Peace Prize award, just like they did Barack Obama. They put her on the cover of Time magazine, just like Barack Obama. Oh, she's a human rights fighter. A genocidal communist operative who took control of a country illegally. Again, they do the same thing over and over and over and over. It really is just beyond me. I don't know what it'll take to wake people up, how they can't see the propaganda machine. And the difference in, quote, news coverage that the communists get compared to the coverage that the patriots get. Did I mention that she's not actually the president because, like the birth certificate issue with Barack Obama, they found out that she wasn't, they have a constitution there as well. She wasn't constitutionally eligible to run for president. So she ran her puppet and they put him in office, and then she was appointed this council above him. So she's been running the country through a surrogate, basically, since she wasn't constitutionally allowed to be president herself.
Obama jokingly says he wishes he could have had a third term with a stand-in during an interview with Stephen Colbert. Take a listen.
If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats, looking through the stuff, and then I could sort of deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking and the ceremony, I'd be fine with that.
Okay, so the good news is, though, their military did act and declare a state of emergency, and they did arrest or round up over 300 politicians in her regime, including governors out in the provinces, not just the ones in the capital. You guys know here we have governors, some of them being recalled like Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer. People who made a big stand to show the incoming regime their faithfulness to just be a tyrant and lock down citizens, take away their rights without any remorse at all. So it's the same thing there. And yeah, they rounded up over 300 people in the regime, including governors out in the provinces. And many of them have been released on house arrest, but they are wearing the ankle monitors as this goes forward. They seem to be experiencing some semblance of justice, and they are having a new election. It's still not everything rosy and everything's going to be okay. So China knew there was a chance that they were going to get caught, and they began courting both sides. The military establishment that would be used to declare the state of emergency and remove the regime, as well as the regime that they placed. They started playing both sides in negotiations. And they were basically trying to keep their control over the Belt and One road that we talked about during the power outages and all through Pakistan in that video. That's their main concern. So they sent ambassadors, and even the president went and talked to their military and said that if you don't stand down on our issue with Taiwan, because Taiwan's trying to get free from China as well through all this Huawei technology and their military and surveillance system and all that. If you don't stand down on Taiwan and stay out of our way on the Belt and One project, then we will militarily retaliate, just like Russia did in the Ukraine. So that's what we're seeing right now in Myanmar. Even though there's some semblance of justice, the military leaders that now have control of the country until the new election, they have agreed with China so that China doesn't just come in and destroy their little nation militarily, that they will stay out of their issues with Taiwan, and they also won't try to stop the Belt and One road.
At the time, Beijing realized that many years of political investment in Myanmar had gone by wind. With the political situation's change, we all know that the CCP's policy is such that whoever has the real power in the country, it would be the political investment target for the CCP. Simply put, only power and money talks in the games played by the CCP. As for this time, Aung San Suu Kyi's situation, the attitude of the CCP is particularly intriguing. Wang didn't call for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader of the brother country of CCP. So isn't that an interesting thing? Let's look further on the reports of the CCP's mouthpiece. Several reports of Xinhua News Agency are trying to downplay the current Myanmar's political incident and frequently quoting the Myanmar military saying, "This really makes people wonder why they do it this way." By turning the time clock back to last year, we might be able to see some insights. Last year, Xi Jinping visited Myanmar and signed the Belt and Road Initiative with Aung San Suu Kyi. Before Xi Jinping, Wang Yi, the CCP's foreign minister, also went to Myanmar. What is interesting is that Wang Yi not only met with Aung San Suu Kyi, but he also met with the military boss, Min Aung Hlaing, the person who detained Aung San Suu Kyi in the current coup. Such diplomatic activities are very extraordinary. This shows that Beijing knows the real power is in the military in Myanmar. And interestingly, the Myanmar military made a high-profile response saying that Myanmar will continue to support China's position on Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang issues.
So the point is, the whole last 2 years of the Trump administration, Pompeo was texting and talking and doing interviews about this Smartmatic software being used in the elections in Myanmar. And likewise, the president of China was making trips to Myanmar, trying to work out the details, because he knew that their allies that they usually have in that area, Obama, Hillary, Biden, all of those players were not in office anymore, and he couldn't control the Trump administration.
On the one hand, if there was fraud, what is interesting is that some people were really worried before the Myanmar election. Pompeo once said that the US government has concerns for the election in Myanmar, and they will be paying close attention to it. And also the Smartmatic was helping Myanmar in polls in 2017.
So for anybody who thinks that this is just about our nation, or anybody who's still wondering why do they have razor wire up, and why do they have more troops than we have in Afghanistan around there? It's because they are all students of foreign affairs, and they have been basing the repercussions of their takeover of our nation on what happened when they did it to other nations. So they saw what happened in Ukraine with the Orange Revolution and how the Supreme Court overturned it. They saw what happened in Myanmar with the military declaring martial law and removing the regime. But the cabal has also seen success in some nations that have fought and fought to get their elections overturned, and they can't find any justice at all, like Venezuela and other South American countries, and in the Philippines even. See, a lot of people, that's a sad thing. They really think that what we're going through here in America is like just about us. We can't say election bleep because it's just about us. But the exact same thing with the exact same players, the exact same companies is happening in Myanmar, in Ukraine, in the Philippines. So for those who don't yet realize that this is a worldwide takeover, here is yet another clip from yet another country who is going through the same exact things with the same exact companies like Smartmatic in their national elections. So here is what's going on in the Philippines.
3 companies implicated in worldwide election meddling scandals are intertwined through a labyrinth of shell companies. Watchdogs in the Philippines have grappled with what they believe is widespread Smartmatic and Dominion-related election manipulation for 10 years. Attorney and former Filipino Congressman Glenn Chong scoured audit logs to uncover how Smartmatic machines had somehow preloaded and transmitted thousands of votes before polls even opened.
Michelle, the term preloaded is exactly the same term I'm using here in Manila. Preloaded votes, preloaded ballots. Again, I point this out to our audience. Look at these pieces of documents. They are signed. We have 70,000 voters. About 4,114 ballots were already scanned by 145 voting machines days before the elections. That's over around 6 or 7%. I've said that my case in my district in Biliran, Philippines, is exactly the same case as in the case of President Trump. He was ahead on the night of the election, and then his lead was wiped out all throughout the day, the next day. That's the same thing with me. I was overtaken at 5:56 in the morning the following day, the day following the elections. In the case of Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr., he was ahead. On the night of the elections, he was ahead by 943,045 votes. That was his lead. Within a few hours, by 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:26, if I remember it right, 3:26 in the morning, all the 943,045 votes lead of Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was wiped.
That's right, wiped out. Chong also exposed automatic vote padding and shaving manipulation by Smartmatic machines, plus what he says is missing and out-of-sequence ballot images. He confronted Smartmatic officials with reams of logs outlining this fraud. Other politicians in the Philippines turned up the heat.
I'm sorry I have to say this, and it seems a little harsh, but what they are not there to sell an electronic election system. They are there to give a method of cheating to whoever pays them the most.
Wow. Instead of providing answers, several Smartmatic officials left the country, including a veteran Smartmatic official named Hyder Garcia. This Venezuelan-born operative now serves, believe it or not, as election administrator for Tarrant County, Texas. That's a county which turned blue for the first time since 1964 after the introduction of new electronic voting machines.
And it's not just limited to nations or countries. This communist election interference can also be seen in international organizations like the World Health Organization. That's why it's so troubling when we see these titans of industry like YouTube CEO say, we'll delete anything that contradicts the World Health Organization. Because it's common knowledge that Tedros was put in charge of the World Health Organization through election interference in Africa. And Africans have been fighting and fighting to get out from under the thumb of communist China. They did the same thing over there. They came in, put all of their businesses out of business, bought up everything, and started taking over multiple countries in Africa, namely Ethiopia is an inroad for China.
And why is the Chinese taking over Africa?
10 years, this will be a Chinese colony.
10 years, this will be a Chinese colony.
Because you cannot talk of political independence when you have no economic independence. Economic independence is the most important thing. Others follow. And we must empower our people and make sure they are protected. And if we don't protect the local capacity and we allow the Chinese to kill the local capacity, they are quoting laws so that our people cannot compete. So this bill intends to protect the local capacity. We want them to partner with us so that it's technology transfer. We want our engineers to be parts of these projects. They are coming with everything: engineers, surveyors, plant operators, drivers. Why do you need to bring somebody from China to drive a truck? Why do you need to bring somebody from China to drive an excavator? We have plant operators here in thousands who are jobless. Our people have closed down their shops. There's no business. These guys now have come, they are even hawking.
Let's face it, this guy is essentially an African warlord, a petty dictator, a Marxist tyrant who has been involved in a regime that imprisons and tortures political opponents, advocates basically shutting down freedom of speech. And now he sits atop the World Health Organization and has had an unbelievable role in dictating the public policy that has shut down the entire planet. John, what can you tell us about this sinister character?
Well, the key thing to understand about Tedros is that he's one of the highest ranking members inside what used to be probably the worst dictatorship in Africa. And so in the last 20 years, Ethiopia imprisoned more journalists than any other country on the planet. And, well, Tedros had a hand in some of that, which I'll get into later.
Why don't you tell us a bit about the Tigray Liberation Front? A lot of these
Tigray
names...
People's Liberation Front. Yeah.
Give that to us again.
The Tigray People's Liberation Front.
Right. And a lot of these names are going to be complicated for people to remember. So that's part of the reason why we want to go over this. It's important information to people to remember, and hopefully it's going to have an impact on closing down some of these draconian policies before it's too late. I remain hopeful that it is not yet too late. So who exactly are the Tigray, and what is the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and Dr. Tedros' role there?
And I'm actually relying on actual journalists in Ethiopia, many of whom have been exiled, who did a lot of this original reporting, specifically.
And isn't it correct, John, that Dr. Tedros and the Tigray People's Liberation Party, they imprison journalists like Abibi? They've reported torture, including rape, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I want to make it clear the kind of government that Tedros belonged to, that he was actually, in a sense, the PR man for.
Growing up as a child in the 1980s, I still have very clear memories of the famine that was going on in Ethiopia. And Dr. Tedros was the third in command as the, what was his role? He was the minister?
Well, Minister of Health. He was director of the health ministry at a time when the government was orchestrated in a campaign to use the famine as basically a counterinsurgency strategy to deny food and medical assistance for opponents of the government. So this is from a report issued by Human Rights Watch 2005, that they would send the army to villages, and if the people there were found to have voted for or be supportive of an opposition party, they'd be denied food, children would be denied medical treatment, if their parents were found to be opposition supporters. And you had gangs that would go to these villages, kill a bunch of people, rape their women. Again, similar reports by Human Rights Watch. And the health ministry that was doing this was being led by Tedros Adhanom.
Mm-hmm. So these aren't hollow accusations. These aren't vague statements. These are very specific actions that have been taken by Tedros Adhanom and the political affiliates he's been aligned with for many years. How did this guy come to be the head of the World Health Organization? Who appoints that position?
It used to be in the World Health Organization that the way the director is appointed was by something called the Executive Committee. And so they were appointed by heads of states, health ministers. And then they changed that in 2015 because it was too secretive. They changed it so that it was the heads of the health ministers that they would directly appoint the leader. And a few weeks before the vote, the African Union unanimously supported Tedros, which guaranteed him about 54 votes, and that pushed him over the line.
Wow.
And so what's important to understand here is that the African Union, the parliament, was built by Chinese companies with the Chinese government's assistance. And they're funded by the Chinese government to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And it was found later that the Chinese government actually built in surveillance to the African Union so that they could use political leverage to manipulate them. And China has no qualms about using bribery and manipulation in general in Africa. There's been reports that they even bribed the president of Chad, that they promoted their other candidates in the United Nations by threatening African Union states. And so, to my mind, it's fairly obvious that if they'd wanted to, they could have used their influence in the African Parliament to have guaranteed Tedros the vote.
What's happened with things like the World Health Organization, I mean, it is a joke. We should have nothing to do with it. The bloke who's now in charge of it has disgraced himself at every stage. He was basically selling the Chinese.
It should be noted Gates is the World Health Organization's second largest donor, period. Second only to the US, but just above the entire United Kingdom.
So it actually did, back in January and February, the World Health Organization, but it was actively working against our interests and as a propaganda arm for the Chinese. Absolute disgrace. We should be pulling out of that organization tomorrow.
And that is why President Trump withdrew our funding for the World Health Organization, because funding the World Health Organization is essentially funding the communist control of our health decisions. And that's also why that's the first thing that Joe Biden did in his first week in office, was go in and reverse that and begin funding the communist dictatorship, which seeks to control every aspect of our life and trace and surveil every move we make. Okay, so thus far we have spent a lot of time talking about what the Titans are doing, what this unholy alliance of communists and Nazis and technocrats have been doing to enslave humankind. But there's another side to this David and Goliath story. So now I want to talk about David, the little guy, us. How does somebody like David take on something like Goliath? And is God even in this? If God can choose anybody, why wouldn't he choose these big, giant multi-billionaires who could actually just get some stuff done? If God wanted to bring down something as big as Mystery Babylon, the Antichrist world empire, why would he choose such a ragtag group of deplorables? Well, obviously, it's because he's just that cool. He is just that cool. Let's see what the Bible says about it. 1 Corinthians 1:26 through 28. Brothers, consider the time of your calling. Not many of you were wise by human standards, and not many were powerful, and not many were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. He chose the lowly and despised things of the world and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are. God chooses the despised, foolish, and weak to be his servants. In doing this, he confounds the mighty. He proves his power, and he reveals who he is. And there are tons of verses all throughout the Bible where he's trying to show us his personality. Well, he said through Jesus He said, if you look at Jesus, you see the Father, the personality of the Holy Spirit. And the religious people of his time were always on his back. They're like, why are you hanging out with the prostitutes and the sinners and the tax collectors instead of, running around with the Hollywood elites and hobnobbing on your yacht? And, how does somebody who's the most powerful leader in the entire world, the king over kings, how does he want to hang out with the lowly people? But he was repeatedly showing us his personality. We have never seen anything like him. People aren't holy. They don't act like him. But he is so holy and so amazing that he chose his first pick. We didn't get picked last for the team. Finally, his first pick for his team were the ones that this world despises, the ones that they consider weak, the ones they abuse and gaslight, the ones they call deplorable. God chose us. And when he looked in the eyes of everybody he chose, he saw a value, an irreplaceable, powerful spirit, a facet of himself. And hopefully by the end of this, you can start to see the value in the people that God has chosen, the value that he sees in them, and the value that he sees in you. What an honor. What an amazing honor to be alive right now. We always talk about our faith in God, but just think about the faith that he had in you, that he chose you, that he had that much faith that he would put the future of the kingdom in your hands, in my hands, in the hands of people that the world despises and mocks and shows no honor to at all. But God, he chose to honor you. The kings of the earth, the ruling class, they choose to honor themselves, to give each other awards at constant award ceremonies, giving each other awards and honoring themselves. They've chosen to adorn themselves in gaudy jewels and gems and riches of all kinds. But God, he adorned himself in you. That's what God wears, the body of Christ. That's what the Holy Spirit wears. The body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. That's why he shines brighter than any diamond. Every one of us are a facet of him. This is what the Bible says about the cabal, the ruling class, who adorn themselves with all of their riches and have decided that they should rule over us. Revelation chapter 3. Look at those who belong to the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be the Jews, but are not, but are liars instead. I will make them to come and bow down at your feet, and they will know that I love you. See, I have placed before you an open door which no one can shut. For you have only a little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I will also keep you from the hour of testing that is about to come upon the whole world. Revelation chapter 18. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to nothing. And every shipmaster and all of the companies and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour thy judgment is come. Revelation 18:11. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Another translation says, because no one buys their merchandise anymore. And it is so important to read and understand the entire Word of God, because I am getting ready to talk about a lot of legal issues and political issues and the players and all of that. But I have to reiterate with this Make America Great Again thing that God is not interested in saving the stock market. Like with the GameStop fiasco that we've seen this past week or two, it is part of Babylon, and it is a structure that's going to come down. Likewise with the fiat currency, that is nothing. It's just printed. They're just printing it as their communist chits to pass out to us. All of this has to come down. We know that a new financial system was trying to be put in place with Abraham Lincoln, with JFK, with all of these other presidents in U.S. history who have been assassinated. And we need to recognize that just because God is moving and he is using servants in all realms of industry and politics and all of that, God's mission is to set up his kingdom. It is not to save Babylon and the artificial constructs. So I just want people to be aware of that and brace up, that just because we are in a move of God and a great revival of the kingdom of God, that in no way means that he's going to save the materialism and open all the small businesses and it's all going to go back to merchandise and materialism and consumerism and all of that. That's not what God's about. And I've noticed a lot as we move through this, when people don't see what they expect to see, some of the weaker start to lose faith or turn on God. So it's important to be able to differentiate between your false expectations of how you thought he was going to do it, didn't come to pass, versus God's not doing it. God is doing it. This is happening. Is it going to happen every step of the way like you've sat down and sketched it out? Absolutely not. It never does. I've walked with God a long time, and in my experience personally, he always comes through, but it's hardly ever the way that I thought he would. But it's always better. His way is always better than the big plan I had. And at this particular stage of human history, the end of an age, there's no doubt it's going to be a bumpy ride. There are going to be highs and lows, and there are going to be times that God's will seems to coincide with the will of the enemy. Why would he let the collapse of the stock market and the economy collapses and there's famine, and all of this has to come down? Because the goal here is to finally be done with this ancient war, for it to end. This cycle of battles and wars and battles and wars that have gone on since the beginning of time, the construct, the artificial construct of time, even that has to come down. And we don't want to. People don't want to. They don't want to give up their iPhones and their devices, and they don't want to come out of Babylon. But all of that, everything is on the internet structure now, and the computer system, like we talked about, even the water supply. Will it even work? There's a lot of things that are going to look bad and painful as we move through this. That's why God is constantly telling people to prepare, prepare, prepare. I mean, just type it in the search engine, even though they have all the search engines all messed up where you can't really find what you actually type in. Still, if you type in warning from God, stock up on supplies, warning from God, store food and water, God is constantly always trying to prepare us so that we can go through it without the horrors that the people who won't listen to him will face. It's on each of us. Do you obey God or do you believe CNN? And of course, I encourage you to obey God. Listen to the servants of God. Prepare yourself, prepare your families. Tell as many people as you can, even if they mock you, even if they despise you, even if they walk away. God says that when he tells his watchmen, if they refuse to sound the alarm, then their blood is on our hands. So I can't live with that. I can live with being in exile like I am, being alone and in pain and gaslighted and mocked and demonetized and my income taken from me and drug into court to have my children taken from me and being put on house arrest with the rest of the covert 19 world, and being shunned and being abandoned and betrayed by my own husband. I can live with all of that. I wish they would wake up and stop hating us and trying to destroy us, But I can live with that. What I can't live with is not warning them. It's not telling as many people as I can to get ready and to come out of Babylon. Because we know Revelation 18:4 says that Babylon's coming down. And if you choose to stay in there, that's your choice. You want the AI, you want the vaccine, you want all of it. Well, be careful what you pray for. Because God says in Revelation 18 that if you partake of her sins, you will partake of her punishments. Then I heard another voice from heaven say, quote, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues." It's going to be hard to lay this stuff down, to walk away, to turn your TV off, to do these things as God takes these artificial constructs down. And it's going to be hard to keep the faith when you see, what the Bible says, the great and terrible day of the Lord. It's going to be great for some because he's going to be raising his children, raising up his kingdom, but he's going to be tearing down another kingdom. This is no time to play games. Those generations are over. Now you must follow God. You must have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. You must listen every day, every moment, what he tells you to do. Not what seems right to a man. Proverbs 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. That's what being left behind really means. Everybody's rapture, rapture, rapture. Oh, I was left behind. You'll be left behind if you don't follow Jesus. The very definition of being left behind means that you are not following him closely. In fact, you know what? I'm going to put a vision in right here from one of our sisters who the Lord shared that exact thing with her, and it's really profound.
Hey, I wasn't expecting to make a video today, but I just had a really crazy encounter with Jesus, and I really want to share it because I don't want to forget any of the details. So I've just been I woke up this morning, I had weird dreams last night. The first thing that the Holy Spirit told me as soon as I woke up was to go take a walk. So I've been trying to be better about listening and being obedient and taking care of my body because he's been speaking to me about that. So I left the house I had a conversation with my husband first before I left, and it's about some pretty serious stuff, but rebuke you, fly. But it was a good conversation, just kind of corrective and loving, but just about some changes that we have to make about being more intentional about our family and our house, and it was good. So I leave to go walk, and I get to this first little hill on my street, and I go into a vision and I see Jesus, and he's walking in front of me in a robe that's white, and I'm praying in tongues this whole time. He told me to pray in tongues in the spirit the whole walk. And so I am, and I see Jesus, and I get this urge in my spirit to start to run. Now, let me tell you guys, I'm not a runner. I am not an exercise junkie. I do not like to sweat or to exert myself. The only reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to be obedient. And I had this urge to run, and I wiped my eyes, and I'm like, is that really what I'm seeing? Jesus, is that you? And I looked again, and lo and behold, it's Jesus. And I I got this sense of urgency that he was leaving me behind. And I got afraid, and I didn't like the space that was between us. And so, as much as I hate to run, I started to jog. And, you know, this road, it's like full of hills and stuff, so it's not exactly one that's easy to run on. But, you know, I'm praying in tongues and I'm calling out for Jesus, and I can't catch up with him. And I got this sense of urgency, like he's leaving me behind. Like he's leaving me behind, like I was a little kid, and you know, and I was watching my dad like get in a car and leave me somewhere, and knowing that he wasn't gonna come back. And so I started running further and faster. And I'm crying. I'm crying like this. It's like I'm running towards Jesus. And I know that my soul and my spirit is crying out, don't leave me behind. Don't leave me behind. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the space I let get between us. Don't leave me behind. And so I just ran. And so then as I'm running, hey, this is my friend. How are you? That's my friend. And wow. Whew. So I'm running and I'm crying out to Jesus about this stuff, and finally, like, I reached this point of the hill where I'm able to catch up to him, and he finally turns and he looks at me, because he hadn't turned his head the whole time that I was running after him, and he held my hand. He said, come and walk beside me. And so I held his hand, and he said, my heart is that not one would be left behind. But many on that day that cried, Lord, Lord, I'll turn my face from them as if I never knew them. And I said, Lord, but those ones are the ones that don't love you. And he said, in the hearts of man, I've placed a hole where my love belongs. And that the only difference between those who already love me and those who don't love me yet is that the ones who don't love me yet don't know that I'm the love of their life. And that they're the love of mine. He said that he's coming back. He's coming back, and it's sooner than we think. And you know, like, as I was running, I was thinking about like all the little petty problems that we have going on in our lives right now, and how, you know, we can get so easily like tripped up on petty offenses and on political agendas, and you know, this person hurt my feeling, and this person hurt my feeling, and this person's wrong, and this and that and the other, and me, and I, and you know, and the truth of the matter is that when I saw Jesus ahead of me, and he was leaving me behind, and I wasn't close to him, none of those things mattered. None of those things mattered. I didn't care about what my husband said to me 2 hours earlier that hurt my feelings. I didn't care about how much money was in my bank accounts. I didn't care, because the only thing that mattered was Jesus. and me getting closer to him, and man, I'm just like, if anything, this is a word for all the people out there, whether you know Jesus or you don't know Jesus. He's coming. He's coming. And it's sooner than we think. And we have got to change our minds. We've got to get away from all the petty distractions and the cares of this life, because they're all corruptible. They're all gonna fade. You know, if the world burns up tomorrow, it's not gonna matter. It's not gonna matter at all. It's not gonna matter. And your house is not gonna matter. Your freshly mowed yard is not gonna matter, okay? Like that petty offense that you keep between your brother or your sister to keep from exposing yourself to, you know, pain or rejection or whatever, it's not gonna matter. What's gonna matter is gonna be whether or not you know Jesus, and whether or not you're close to him, and whether or not your family knows Jesus, and whether or not they're close to him, and whether or not your friends know Jesus, and if they're close to him, because he's eternal. He's the only thing that's gonna live. It's in him that we have eternal life. And when all of this blows away in his dust, when your life is over, he's the only thing that remains. And I am scared right now. I am scared for the body of Christ and where we're at. I am scared for the world at large. Jesus is coming, and I don't want to be left behind. So I repent, God, I repent. I ask that you forgive me. God, I ask that you forgive the church. I ask that you forgive your bride, God, for not being prepared, for allowing the cares of this life and comfort and our opinions and our self-righteousness and our pride and our egos to rise above the preeminence of who you are. I ask that you forgive us, God. Purify your bride. Don't leave us behind. Don't leave us behind, and baptize us in a love and a holy, all-consuming fire that makes us want to desire with all fervency and fear and honor and respect of the Lord to lay aside every idle, worthless thing, to run towards you and your high calling.
Matthew 10:28. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So no matter what happens as we walk through this, or how long we're here or we're not here, or we get taken out right away, you know, we're all praying for the best, but also preparing for the worst. So don't be naive. Don't live in fear. Let's do this. Let's be brave. Let's move forward. But brace up, and don't ever give up your faith in God if you see things that you don't understand, because the way of a man is not the way of God. These are the times that test the faith of men. If you've already lost faith that God's going to complete what he said he would complete over something as simple as this election, if you can't believe that it ain't over, then how are you going to have faith in God's word when these bigger things come? These are the times that try men's faith. We need to learn to stand in faith, stand on the word of God, trust him. He will surely complete what he has begun. And what he has begun is this: the tearing down of this ancient Babylonian empire that has persisted through the ages. Mystery Babylon. And it says the stone that is thrown from heaven that strikes it on its feet. The Bible says that stone is the stone that the builders rejected. It is Jesus Christ, the cornerstone. Daniel 2:44. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. That kingdom of heaven, that kingdom of God, that body of Christ, that's us. We are the move of God. We are the children of God. Romans 8:19. For the entire creation eagerly awaits with anticipation for the sons of God to be revealed. That the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until the present time. Not only that, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Holy Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as the sons of God. So two completely different things are going on at the same time. One kingdom is being struck down, torn down, and one kingdom is being raised up. And we all have to choose. Are you going up or are you going down? Everybody is part of a movement, whether you think you are or not, whether you are aware of it or not. Those are the laws of physics. That's science. All energy is in motion. So just because somebody chooses to be blind or chooses to stay in denial or whatever, it doesn't change the fact that we are all in a movement and there is no left or right. There's only up and down. We use these terms because we're trying to communicate with the masses, and this is the terminology we've been given. But when you take like the English language and then you translate it into frequencies, it's only up. There are higher frequency dimensions and there are lower frequency dimensions. There's heaven and there's hell. And there is no straddling the fence. If you think you are straddling the fence right now, you're deceiving yourself. There is no standing still. Everybody is in motion. You are moving towards something right now. You are either headed to hell or you are headed to heaven. You are either helping build the kingdom of heaven or you are helping create hell. I'm sorry if that may seem harsh, but that's the fact. If you think you're in the valley of decision and you're just straddling the fence and you're just standing still, there is no standing still. You are either a rising star or a fallen angel. That's the fact. You are expanding upward and outward. You are growing upward and outward, or you are spiraling down. You are spiraling down the funnel of Dante's Inferno. And this far along in the game, it's really not rocket science to figure out who's who. You know a tree by its fruit. You can't tell me you're an apple tree and you have lemons on your branches. You can't tell me you're for unity, while at the very same time, you're trying to have anyone who didn't vote for you rounded up as domestic terrorists. And God is pulling off the masks. He's uncovering everything, exposing everything for everyone to see. Okay, let's just hop around this rectangle, start clicking on some of these people and get some updates about what God is doing in the earth with this ragtag group of deplorables that the world despises. And hopefully as we go through this, you'll start to see a theme emerge. A lot of people think that this is all about Trump and about elections, or even about China. So as we take a look at some of these trees, try to keep your focus on the forest and the bigger picture. Let's just start with Mike Lindell. He had some fireworks this past week with Newsmax cutting him off.
The company page.
Well, first mine was taken down because we have all the election fraud with these Dominion machines. We have 100% proof. And then when they took it down about 3 weeks ago, and then I'm going to put it back up. My personal, it was a
Mike, thank you very much. Mike, you're talking about machines that we at Newsmax have not been able to verify any of those kinds of allegations. We just want to let people know that there's nothing substantive that we've seen. And let me read you something there. While there were some clear evidence of some cases of vote fraud and election irregularities, the election results in every state were certified, and Newsmax accepts the results as legal and final. The courts have also supported that view.
So I'm sorry if you think it's not
Mike,
real.
can I ask our producers, can we get out of here, please? I don't want to have to keep going over this. We at Newsmax have not been able to verify any of those allegations that you're
Mike, hold on a second. Everybody hold on a second. Mike, hold on 1 second.
And that is how you know who's who. A lot of people have mistakenly trusted Newsmax and Fox News and some of these other posers. And they have some good broadcasts. You know me, I'm not a throw the baby out with the bathwater. Of course, they threw Lou Dobbs off of Fox, so I don't know how much is salvageable in any of them. But you know, I use clips from time to time. If somebody says something, I like the way they articulate it, and I think it gets the point across, I can appreciate that. But at the same time, we can't make the mistake of not knowing that they have ulterior motives.
Fox has touched off a firestorm of criticism after an appearance by Newt Gingrich on one of their shows. Fox News Channel is being accused of censoring criticism of the left-wing extremist and Democrat socialist financier George Soros after this exchange went viral on social media.
Pro-criminal and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros's money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're good.
It's getting so ridiculous. It really is the theater of the absurd. And that's what we're talking about. God is exposing it. Think about it. When we were coming up, or when I was coming up like 20 years ago, you didn't have people just walking off their own news shows or cutting off the president of the United States like Shepard Smith saying, I'm sorry, we can't let the president speak to the people of the United States because I don't like what he's saying. Or Neil Cavuto doing the same thing to Kayleigh, the press secretary. I mean, it's just becoming so obvious now. Everything is coming to fruition, the good and the bad. And now we can see. It's the parable of the wheat and the tares, Matthew 13. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. That's my prayer right now. God, forgive us for being asleep on the job. Where were we? Why did we turn a blind eye while they were wiping out the whole next generation of humans through abortion? And not just turn a blind eye, but I know tons of people who call themselves Christians who voted for these people. I remember way back during Clinton era when he was molesting interns with cigars in the Oval Office, and his sperm was all over the dresses of these interns, and all of this was going on, and Christians talking to Christian leaders, in fact, at some camps, Christian camps that I had gone to, Christian retreats. Why did the church not just turn a blind eye, but actually help create hell on earth? Actually use their lives to lift up and put these people as rulers over us? Why did the church just roll over and say, oh, a little leaven won't hurt, when they were lighting the White House up for sodomy, celebrating sodomy? Why did we roll over and go back to sleep? We should have nipped this in the bud, but we're here now, so this is the parable. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares appeared also. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servants said to him, Do you want us to go out and gather them up? But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First gather together the tares, and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. So this is what we're seeing. It's harvest time, and everything has come to fruition. And now we can clearly see who the weeds are, who the tares are. You know, the mainstream always talks about Mike Lindell, and it's always my pillow, or it's the election stuff. Like right now, David Hogg is saying that, well, he's going to start making pillows. He's going to teach him a lesson. He's going to teach that Mike Lindell a lesson, and he's going to make pillows and be rich. And you see these prominent mainstream publications like Newsweek joining in that sort of childish hate. David Hogg's Good Pillow already has more Twitter followers than My Pillow ever did. But while they're manifesting their vitriol and their love to try to harm others, while it's all being shown to the world, Mike Lindell is about the Father's business. First, in service to his country, he made this documentary and just released it. Absolute proof. Sidney Powell has put up posts about how to get free DVDs, and I think it's on America One streaming for free. He paid for the commercial space time to run it for free. That's how he's using his money. And that's why God blesses him. So that's just service to country, though. But Mike also preaches the gospel. God has given him a great testimony of redemption and resurrection, from being a crack addict to a CEO, a millionaire, a multimillionaire. And Mike uses his life all over talk shows and everything to testify for Jesus Christ. He doesn't just make pillows to make money. He has set up all sorts of hotlines for addiction and networked together faith-based treatment centers to help others who are going through what he went through.
LindellRecoveryNetwork.org. And what that is just like when my friend Dick came to me back in 2008 when I was down and out, right? But we were equal. I call it a hope match. Who am I going to listen to more other than someone that's been there?
Yes.
And then I asked him, is it boring? Is that relationship with Jesus boring? And he said, no, man, it ain't boring.
You found out it's not boring.
That's right. It's amazing. And anyway, if you go to LindellRecoveryNetwork.org, you go there and you're going to see all these matches. You'll put in your age and your addiction, and it just puts in there so you can relate. And then it opens up. It's the best online help you'll ever have. It's also a directional thing that's going to get you the right help. I've spent 2 years vetting the best help in this country, which, by the way, is all faith-based treatment centers. Your Teen Challenge, your Salvation Army, Union Golf, stuff like that. You know, secular centers, you're just spinning your wheels. You're wasting your time. You need Jesus.
I agree.
Where it's the forces that are happening. This is spiritual warfare going on in our country and world.
Yes.
And there's only two ways this goes, either end times, because we all know what's happening right now. This attack, this communism coming in, this vaccine, all this stuff, mark of the beast. I mean, you could go on and on in Revelation. But I believe that it's either that or what I believe, because wait, you're going to see the start of the parting of the Red Sea on Friday. I really believe that. And what's going to happen is when we get through this, I'm telling you, it's going to be the biggest coming to Jesus and the greatest revival in history. This is the best time to be alive. We're part of this. It's either one way or another. This is the greatest time to be alive.
It really is an honor to be alive right now, and there's so much exciting stuff coming. I mean, think about it. The unveiling of all things. How many generations would have longed to have seen this stuff? But anyway, I can't believe it. Can you believe it? I'm already at the 3-hour mark again, and I have to cut it off. I have to cut it off quickly. I didn't even get to the new evidence that Lynn Wood dropped and the new intelligence agency whistleblower right here on the screen about Mike Pence and Justice Roberts. But I'm out of time again, and I'm going to have to cut this off right here. I promise that will be right at the beginning of part 3, and we'll wrap it up in part 3. I will get it all done in part 3. So we'll start off. I got my list right in front of me. We'll start off with Lynn Wood, then Roger Stone, then Donald Trump. Here, this on the screen is so interesting. I have a really fascinating segment on Donald Trump's family back in Scotland. Remember, I had talked about that a little bit in a past video. Remember this one that had the Julian Assange and Dr. John Trump thumbnail? That one. I had talked a little bit about Donald Trump's family back in Scotland and him going back there to do some digging, if you will, and build a golf course, and his mother being attacked and beaten down by that lawyer's son on Halloween night. Well, I have some more information on his family and the Isle of Lewis in Scotland that I'd really like to share with everybody. And also another quick segment on Julian Assange, especially his very last words in that video before communications were cut, when he said from the Ecuadorian embassy, in London when they cut communications right when he was talking about this intelligent, quote, evil dust. So this all ties in to what we're talking about here, but we're almost done with TITANpointe. I got to cut it off here. Please come back for part 3 if you find yourself interested in this stuff. I love you guys. God bless you and your families.